Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay, so inshallah, in this series of videos, we're going to move forward with a book written by one of my favorite authors. His name is Mustafa Lutfi al-Manfaluti, and he passed away about 100 years ago in the 1920s. He was born to an Egyptian father, Turkish mother, and he studied at Al-Azhar, and he was one of the best fiction writers, and he wrote novels, and he wrote short stories and essays, and he would translate from French. But they say that he didn't know French, so he had some friends and colleagues, and he would pay them and get them to take the play, the French work of literature, and translate it into Arabic, and then he just rewrite it. So he has a number of books that are quite famous, and they're collected together in two large volumes. And this is one of the two volumes. It's called Mu'allafatu Mustafa Lutfi al-Manfaluti, and his most famous work is An-Nadharat. And then he has some novels like Al-Fadila, and then there's one called Fi Sabili Taj, In Pursuit of the Crown, and then he has one Ash-Sha'ir, and he has 8 short stories collected together in a single volume called Al-Abarat, and that's what we have in front of us. Al-Abarat means tears. So these are love stories essentially, like Romeo and Juliet level stories, and they're extremely well written. And the level of high level prose is astonishing, and they're so enjoyable. I mean, I first read these, I first became exposed to this author when I was in the madrasa, when I was in Darul Karachi in my early 20s. So there was a teacher, not my teacher, not one of my teachers, but a teacher in the madrasa that I was familiar with, and I saw it in his room, so I borrowed it and I read it. And then eventually I acquired all of his books and read them all. And this is like years ago, like more than 20 years ago. And I'm now refamiliarizing myself with it. So inshallah, we'll go through one of the 8 stories in Al-Abarat. It's lengthy, it's about 60, 70 pages, and it might take us a number of sessions to get through it completely, but we'll do it. Okay, so we're not going to focus on every single word that's occurring. Okay, like all of the vocabulary. What we'll do is we'll read it sentence by sentence, not line by line, sentence by sentence. And if you want just the Arabic without the English translation and the explanation, then you can find this on YouTube. If you YouTube the name Al-Dhahiyya, al-Manfaluti, then there's audiobooks where native Arab speakers have taken the entire story and read it out. But then I've accessed some of them, and what I've noticed is that there's quite embarrassing mistakes, grammar mistakes, Arab mistakes, and it does get in the way of enjoying the work when the speaker is, you can tell that they're making mistakes. Okay, so but if you want that, you can get that separately. Inshallah, I'll throw the link in the description below. So without any further ado, let's begin with the translation. Okay, so like I mentioned, there's certain words that we might not know the meaning of those words. So you have a choice. You can pause and you can look it up in the dictionary and try to figure it out and then move on. Or if you understand 80-90% of the sentence and there's that one word which he's tagged together with another word, which sort of means you know what it means, but you don't know the exact meaning, so you just move on and you get the gist of it and move on and you read for pleasure. Basically, that's what we're doing here. Okay? So there's going to be a lot of vocabulary here, but again, just listen, watch, listen, and see how the English is being extracted from the Arabic, and enjoy the story. If nothing else, I'm confident that you will enjoy the listening experience. So let's begin. Al-Dhahiyya means victim. Mutarjamatun means that it's a translation from an earlier work from some French playwriter. So what he did is he had one of his friends translate it and then he rewrote it. Mutarjama. Nashat Marguerite Joutier faqiratan. That this Marguerite Joutier, she grew up. Nashat faqiratan, poor. She grew up poor. لا تملك مالا, not in possession of any wealth. تشتري به زوجا. This should be زوجا. تشتري به زوجا, not in possession of any wealth with which she could purchase a husband, because in those non-Muslim societies, the female, the wife, would need to come up with the dowry, which is really upside down. But anyways, unless you had some money, you weren't able to secure for yourself a husband, and she found herself in that position. ولا تجد بين الرجال من يبيعها نفسه ولا تجد بين الرجال من يبيعها نفسه بلا مال أو يحسن إليها بما يسد خلتها ويستر عورتها. And she did not find she did not find among the men anyone who would give to her himself, sell her himself free of charge. Okay, so she had no money through which she could buy a husband, nor did she find any volunteers, any males, any men that could become her husband free of charge. أو يحسن إليها, or extend to her favor through which she could satisfy her need. بما يسد, extend to her that through which she could satisfy her need. أو يحسن إليها بما يسد خلتها. سد يسد means to fill a need. خلتها. ويستر عورتها, and cover over her vulnerability or her weakness or her nakedness. In other words, clothe her, shelter her. وكان لا بد لها أن تعيش. But she absolutely had to live. She had no choice but to live. So what's she going to do? What is she going to do? فلم تجد بين يديها, so she did not find in front of her سوى عرضها, other than her honor and her dignity. فذهبت به. So you can see where this is going, right? فذهبت به إلى سوق الشقاء والآلام. So she took that dignity of hers and that honor to the marketplace of wickedness and pain. فساومها فيه بعض المساومين. So some bargainers bargained with her and negotiated about that dignity, like, give us that dignity and we'll give you money instead. بأبخس الأثمان. So some bargainers negotiated with her and bargained with her for that dignity with the lowest of prices, in exchange for the lowest of prices. فباعته إياه كارهة مرغمة. So she sold it to him unwillingly and grudgingly, and not happy with the transaction at all. وكانت من الخاسرين, and she ended up to be of those that were losers. Okay, he moves on. وَلَقَدْ كَانَ جَمَالُهَا شُؤْمًا عَلَيْهَا, and her beauty had become a curse against her. فَلَوْ أَنَّهَا كَانَتْ شَوْهَاءَ, because if she was ugly, لَوَجَدَتْ فِي النَّاسِ, then she would have absolutely found among the people مَنْ يَرْحَمُهَا وَيَحْنُ عَلَيْهَا, those who would have mercy on her and pity her and have compassion over her. وَيَحْنُ عَلَيْهَا. So رَحِمَ يَرْحَمُ and حَنَا يَحْنُ. حَنَا يَحْنُ means to be compassionate, and it comes with the ala in the vicinity. وَيَحْنُ عَلَيْهَا. وَلَكِنَّ الْجَمَالَ, beauty. However, beauty is a سِلْعَةٌ مِنَ السِّلْعِ النَّافِقَةِ, is a valuable commodity. It's a thing that could be sold for a high price. سِلْعَةٌ مِنَ السِّلْعِ النَّافِقَةِ. لا يستطيع صاحبه. Okay, now pay attention to the sentence. لا يستطيع صاحبه, in other words, صاحب الجمال, أن ينال ما في أيدي الناس إن كان فقيرا معوزا. فقيرا means poor, and معوزا is sort of a synonym, so impoverished, poor, like destitute. إلا من طريق المساومة, and مساومة is the word that came up here. ساومها فيه بعض المساومين, it means to bargain and to negotiate. So what's he saying? He's saying that the one who has beauty is not capable of getting and acquiring what is in the hands of people if they happen to be poor and destitute, except through bargaining in that beauty, except through putting that beauty and using it as a bargaining chip and selling it, essentially. لذلك, for this reason, نقمت تلك الفتاة المنكوبة على الرجال جميعا. So نقم means to hate. Okay, like it comes in the Quran several places that you do not hate us for anything other than the fact that we say La ilaha illallah. لذلك نقمت تلك الفتاة المنكوبة. Mankuba means calamity stricken. I think that's fine. لذلك نقمت تلك الفتاة المنكوبة على الرجال جميعا. And it is for this reason that this poor, calamity stricken, suffering girl hated all men. She had an intense hatred for all men. وأقسمت, because they're taking advantage of her. وأقسمت, and she swore an oath, أن تتخذ من جمالها الذي هو مطبح أنظارهم وقبلة آمالهم آلة انتقام تنتقم بها منهم لعرضها وشرفها. And she swore an oath that she will use her beauty, that is the end all be all of what they're interested in, مطمح أنظارهم, and it's the focus of all of their hopes and the thing that they covet the most. So she's going to take that beauty and turn it into an alat intiqamin, an instrument of revenge, with which she will avenge her honor and her respect that she lost. تَنْتَقِمُ بِهَا مِنْهُمْ. She would take revenge from them for her dignity and for her honor and respect. وَلَقَدْ بَرَّتْ بِيَمِينِهَا بِرَّ الْوَفِيِّ بِعَهْدِهِ. So barra means to be truthful in the oath that you swear. So she followed through with that oath. وَلَقَدْ بَرَّتْ, and she was truthful in that oath, similar to how a loyal person is truthful to their covenant, fulfills their covenant. بِعَهْدِهِ فَعَاشَرَتِ الرِّجَالِ. So what did she do? فَعَاشَرَتِ الرِّجَالَ وَلَمْ تُحِبَّهُمْ. So she lived with men and did not love them. وَنَكَبَتْهُمْ فِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ. And she caused them pain and suffering. Nakabat. And the earlier word was naqamat, with a qaf and a mim. The one that, this one here. لِذَلِكَ نَقَمَت تَنْقِمُونَ وَمَا تَنْقِمُونَ. It comes in the Quran, right? Like I quoted. Naqama. And this is nakaba. And that mankuba word, the one that I was having a little trouble with, is from the same root. Can you see that? نقمت تلك الفتاة المنكوبة. Okay, the one that was caused pain and suffering. This young girl that was caused great pain and suffering, it is for this reason that she hated all men. And then over here it's saying وَنَكَبَتْهُمْ, and she caused them pain. And now she's the one causing the pain because the verb is active. Let me know in the comments how you're finding this. Like, we're probably about 10 minutes in. So right now, pause the video, post a comment. Don't wait until the end. Post a comment right now and tell me, like, the Arabic value. Well, what do you feel about the Arabic value here, the language comprehension perspective, from the language comprehension perspective. وَنَكَبَتْهُمْ فِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ, and she caused them pain in their property, in their wealth, and also in their souls. وَلَمْ تَأْسَفْ عَلَيْهِمْ, and she had no regret, and she was not sorry for them, she did not pity them. وَنَظَرَتْ إِلَى دُمُوعِ الْبَاكِينَ تَحْتَ قَدَمَيْهَا, and she looked to the tears of those that were crying under her feet. نَظَرَاتِ الْغِبْدَةِ وَالسُّرُورِ, with joy and happiness. نَظَرَاتِ الْغِبْدَةِ وَالسُّرُورِ. وَهِيَ تَقُولُ, while saying, وَيْحٌ لَكُمْ يَا مَعْشَرَ الرِّجَالِ, woe to you, O assembly of men. مَا كُنْتُ أَطْلُبُ مِنْكُمْ. Okay, this is the beautiful sentence. Pay attention. ما كنت أطلب منكم باسم الفضيلة والشرف إلا رغيفا واحدا. ما كنت أطلب منكم باسم الفضيلة والشرف إلا رغيفا واحدا لغدائي وآخر لعشائي فأبيتموها علي. فلما طلبت منكم باسم الرذيلة جميع ما تملك أيديكم من مال ونشب بذلتموه لي طائعين مختارين فما أصغر نفوسكم وأخس أقداركم. Woe to you, O assembly of men! I was not requesting and desiring from you in the name of virtue and honor, except for a single loaf of bread, for a single piece of bread, not a loaf, for a single piece of bread, لغدائي, for my lunch, and another for my dinner, وآخر لعشائي فأبيتموها علي, and you refused to give even that to me, and you refused that, and you withheld that from me. فأبيتموها علي. So this is abaya. It means to refuse and to withhold. فَلَمَّا طَلَبْتُ مِنْكُمْ, so when I sought from you and desired from you in the name of sin, بِسْمِ الرَّضِيلَ. So over there was fadila and over here is radila. In the name of sin, all of what your hands possess in terms of wealth and property. مَا تَمْلِكُ أَيْدِيكُم مِّن مَالٍ وَنَشَبٍ. So mal means wealth. Nashab, I'm not quite sure what it means. It probably means property. But when we go through this, there are words that might trip us, and we might not know what they mean. But I think the thing is, like, as long as they don't get in the way of understanding what the paragraph means, I think we should just move on. And separately, if you want to look it up, you can. But the point here is not to, arrive at 100% of what he's saying, because this is not like a matan in fiqh. It's a storybook. So as long as you get the overall idea of what he's saying, it's good to move on. And you'll pick up new words, and you'll see words being used repeatedly, that like that nakabat and mankuba, and that means to cause pain. Okay, so I was struggling with the translation of it first, but then when he used it again, then I figured out without having to look at the dictionary. How about that? Okay, so when I sought from you in the name of sin all of what your hands possess, all of the wealth and property that your hands possess, you freely and wholeheartedly spent all of that for me. بذلتموه. You gave all of that to me. فما أصغر نفوسكم. So how low is your self-esteem? وأخست أقداركم. And how degraded are your values? ولقد كان في استطاعة أصغركم شأنا. And it was totally within the power of even the lowest of you in terms of status. Okay, now the khabar, the subject of the sentence hasn't yet come. وَلَقَدْ كَانَ, so he's delaying it. He's delaying the ism of kana in order to create suspense. وَلَقَدْ كَانَ فِي اسْتِطَاعَةِ أَصْغَرِكُمْ شَأْنًا وَأَهْوَنِكُمْ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ وَعَلَى النَّاسِ جَمِيعًا أَنْ يَشْتَرِيَ. And that's the subject of the sentence that's coming on the next line. And it was totally within the power of the lowest of you in status and the one who has the lowest self-esteem, or the one who was the most debased according to their own self and according to all of the people. It was within the power of even that person to purchase from me my body and my heart and my life. أن يشتري مني جسمي وقلبي وحياتي, in exchange for no price other than the removal of my need and the preservation of my dignity and honor. فَلَمْ تَفْعَلُوا. And you people were not willing to do that. Okay? أن يشتري مني جسمي وقلبي وحياتي بلا ثمن سوى سد خلتي وصيانة عرضي فلم تفعلوا. فها هم أولئك اليوم. So here you are, all of you. فها هم أولئك. So here you are today, عظماؤكم, your lords and your nobles, يجثون تحت قدمي, kneeling beneath my feet, kneeling at my feet. In English they say at my feet. يجثون تحت قدمي, kneeling at my feet. جثي الكلب الذليل, in the manner of the humiliated dog that kneels at the foot of his master's dinner table. تحت مائدة سيده. مائدة means dinner table. فلا ينالون مني أكثر مما ينال منها. So they do not get from me more than what it gets from it. In other words, the dog gets from the dinner table. فلا ينالون مني أكثر مما ينال منها. So let me reread that again. ولقد كان في استطاعة أصغركم شأنا وأهونكم على نفسه وعلى الناس جميعا أن يشتري مني جسمي وقلبي وحياتي بلا ثمن سوى سد خلتي وصيانة عرضي فلم تفعلوا. فها هم أولئك اليوم عظماؤكم وأشرافكم يجثون تحت قدمي جثي الكلب الذليل تحت مائدة سيده فلا ينالون مني أكثر مما ينال منها. أحببتم المال حبا جما. You people are obsessively in love with wealth. فأبيتم, so you refused. إلا أن تتزوجوا ذات مال, except to marry a wealthy affluent woman, ذات مال, لتضموا طارفها إلى تليدكم, in order that you could combine her newly acquired wealth with your already existing wealth. إلى تليدكم. So طارف and تليد. So طارف, he has here in the footnote, he says طارف من المال حديثه. طارف is newly acquired wealth, like new money. And التليد would be قديمه, the old money. So you already had money and now you're trying to increase what you already own by combining to your wealth her wealth. You see? So it's all for selfish gain, isn't it? So she says, so she's hypothetically speaking to the men, and she's saying that you people love wealth so much that you refuse to marry anyone except a wealthy woman so that you can combine her new wealth with your old wealth. فَابْذَلُوا الْيَوْمَ لِمْرَأَةٍ مُومِسٍ. So go ahead and spend today for a prostitute woman, give to her everything you have. فَابْذَلُوا الْيَوْمَ. فَابْذَلُوا. So is it فَابْذَلُوا? Okay, so it's a command verb. فَابْذَلُوا الْيَوْمَ لِمْرَأَةٍ مُومِسٍ. مُومِس means prostitute. لَا تَمْنَحُكُمْ. For a prostitute woman, the مفعول به, the object of فَابْذَلُوا hasn't yet come. بَذَلَ means to spend. And he's delaying it. He's extending the phrase. Can you see that? فَابْذَلُوا الْيَوْمَ لِمْرَأَةٍ مُومِسٍ لَا تَمْنَحُكُمْ مَالًا وَلَا حُبًّا جَمِيعًا. There you go. That's the مفعول به. جميعا. So spend today for a prostitute woman who does not give to you any money and does not give to you any love, all of the silver and gold that you possess within your hands. جميع ما في أيديكم من فضة وذهب حتى لا يبقى, to the point that nothing remains for you, no new wealth nor any old wealth. To the point that for you does not remain any new wealth nor any old wealth. In other words, you go completely broke. Okay, so she's okay. Obviously, she's not happy, right? Okay, now he moves on to the next section. ظهرت مارغريت في سماء باريس. This will be with the alif. Paris, Paris. كوكبا متلألئا يبعث الأنوار ويبهر الأنظار. يبعث. بعث يبعث means to send. So anwar, it emits light. Okay, so a shining star that emits light. ويبهر الأنظار, and dazzles people's eyesight. So Margaret appeared in the sky of Paris as a twinkling star that emits rays of light and dazzles the people's eyesight. ويملأ أجواز الفضاء, and fills the areas of the space. بهجة وضياء, with glamour and with light. ضياء, I guess. فطارت حولها العقول طيران النحل حول الزهر. So around her, minds would fly, similar to how bees fly around flowers. طيران النحل حول الزهر. So this is bees. It's plural, because if you wanted to say one bee, a honeybee, it would be نحلة with a round ta, and this is زهر, which means flowers. It doesn't mean flower, it means flowers. وصال النضار بين يديها سيلان الجدول المتدفق تحت الشعة الأصيل. And glamour and glory, okay, nadar, okay, I'm not sure what that means. Okay, so the minds would fly around her, similar to how bees fly around flowers. Sala means to flow, and a nadar would flow in front of her, similar to how a gushing stream would flow, would glow, okay, underneath the rays of the evening sun. تحت الشعة الأصيل. Okay, so in other words, the celebrities and the people of influence would subjugate themselves to her, and she would. Okay, so I guess you get the picture what he's saying, right? وعنت لها الوجوه الكريمة, and the noble faces would become humble towards her. وتعفرت تحت قدميها الجباه الرفيعة, and exalted and proud foreheads would become dusty beneath her feet. وتعفرت تحت قدميها الجباه الرفيعة وأصبحت أعناق الرجال. Okay, this is a nice sentence. وأصبحت أعناق الرجال في يدها كأنما قد سلكتهم جميعا في سلك واحد. And the necks of the men within her hand became as if she had woven them all into a single wire. So she's now connected them all together in a single wire. ثم أمسكت بطرف السلك, and now she holds on to the end of the wire. تحركه فيتحركون. So giving it, moving it, as a result of which they move. وتمسك عنه, and holding it still, as a result of which they are held still. وتمسك عنه فيمسكون. Okay, let me reread that again. He says, وأصبحت أعناق الرجال في يدها كأنما قد سلكتهم جميعا في سلك واحد. ثم أمسكت بطرف السلك تحركه فيتحركون وتمسك عنه فيمسكون. وكان شأنها معهم شأن صاحب الكلب مع كلبه, and her treatment of them, or her behavior with them, or her affair with them, was no different than the way that the dog master treats his dog. لا يشبعه فيستغني عنه. He does not completely satisfy it, thus causing that dog to become independent. لا يشبعه فيستغني عنه ولا يجيعه. Nor does he starve it to the point that the dog loses all hope. فييأس منه فكانت تملأ نفس عاشقها أملا ورجاء. So she would fill the soul and the heart of her lover with hope and ambition. أملا ورجاء حتى إذا ظن, to the point that until when that lover would begin thinking that his أن قد دنا به حظه, that he's now about to achieve something big and it's very near. Dana means to be near, that his hadh and his allotted portion will shortly be acquired. وَأَن لَيْسَ بَيْنَهُ وَبَيْنَ أَمَلِهِ, and that there's nothing between him and between achieving his goal, إِلَّا أَن يَمُدَّ إِلَيْهِ يَدَهُ, other than extending the hand and taking it. إِلَّا أن يمد إليه يده فيناله. ذادته عنه, she would push him away. ذادته عنه ذود الظامئ الهيمان عن ورده, similar to how a thirsty person dying of thirst is held back and kept away from the water that they're about to acquire. أدنى ما يكون إلى فمه, at its closest moment to that person's mouth. That water is the closest it's ever been to the person's mouth. You take it away from them. فإذا علمت أن اليأس قد بلغ من نفسه, so when she would see and sense that despair has completely taken this person over, قد بلغ من نفسه, has reached the extent of its possible level, وأنه قد أزمع, and that this person is now determined أن يركب رأسه إلى حيث لا مرد له, to أزمع قد أزمع أن يركب رأسه. Okay, wait. Yeah, so the subject is يأس. فإذا علمت أن اليأس قد بلغ من نفسه وأنه قد أزمع أن يركب رأسه إلى حيث لا مرد له. So when she would sense that despair has reached the highest level with respect to this person, and despair has now firmly resolved to ride this person's head and take them to a place from which there's no coming back, at that point بعثت وراءه شعاعا, she would send behind the despair a glimmer or a ray from the rays of her sweet smiles. Okay, شعاعا من أشعة ابتساماته العذبة الخلابة. Her, okay, خلابة, I guess, I'm not sure what the English word for that would be. شعاعا, so she sends a شعاع, a ray, from the rays of her sweet, captivating smiles. I think that's the right word, captivating smiles. فاستردته إليها, so she is able to bring that person back from the depths of despair, صاغرا مستسلما, humiliated and submissive. وكذلك أصبحت تلك الفتاة الجائعة العارية, and in this manner, this hungry, garmentless, naked young lady, that just yesterday she would have trouble acquiring a single morsel of food, and drags were causing her trouble and making it difficult for her to live. In other words, she couldn't find any clothing to wear, she couldn't find any food to eat. She became سيدة باريس. وكذلك أصبحت تلك الفتاة الجائعة العارية التي كانت تعوزها بالأمس اللقمة. So the single look, the morsel had made her poor. تعوزها had put her in need. وتعييها الخرقة, and the khirqa had made her helpless. Khirqa means the drags or garment, clothing. Okay, so this Sayyidat Baris is the khabar of the Asbaha here. Became what? Became Sayyidat Baris, she became the queen of Paris. وَصَاحِبَةَ عَرْشِهَا, and the one sitting on its throne. وَمَالِكَةَ الزِّمَّةِ رِجَالِهَا, and the one who owned and controlled the reins of all of its men. وَفَاجِعَةَ قُلُوبِ نِسَائِهَا, and the one that would bring tragedy to the hearts of its women. وَالنَّجْمَ الْخَارِقِ, I think this should be khariq and not khaliq, and its piercing star, الَّذِي تَسْتَهِلُّ إِلَيْهِ الْعُيُونِ, that would captivate the sights and the eyes, and people's eyes would draw to it. والسر الغامض, and the secret and the concealed secret الذي تحار فيه الظنون, in which speculations would run wild and be perplexed. تحار, be perplexed. ذلك ما يعلمه الناس من أمرها. This is what people knew regarding her affair. أما ما تعلمه من أمر نفسها, as for what she knew about her own self, completely different story. فهي ترى أن جميع ما يبذله لها الناس من فضة وذهب وأثاث ورياش وقصور ودور وجياد ومركبات لا يساوي دمعة واحدة من تلك الدموع التي سكبتها على نفسها يوم باعت عرضها. Okay, pretty powerful sentence. He says ذلك ما يعلمه الناس من أمرها. Okay, what we mentioned in the previous paragraphs, this is what the people knew about her affair. As for what she knew about her own affair, فهي ترى. So she saw that all of what the people would spend for her, meaning their silver and their gold. So this min here is bayaniya. It's clarifying the vagueness of the ma. Okay, so the ma is vague. So what we do is we take the min fiddatin wa dhahab and insert it in the translation over there. So all of the silver and gold. So we take the ma and substitute it. All of the silver and gold that the people were spending for her, and all of the furniture and the fur, وقصور, and the palaces and the mansions and the houses, وقصور ودور, and the horses and the carriages, وجياد ومركبات. All of that, لا يساوي, does not even equal a single tear. لا يساوي دمعة واحدة من تلك الدموع, from those tears that she shed on her own self the day she sold her honor. التي سكبتها على نفسها يوم باعت عرضها وأن جميع هذه اللآلئ والجواهر, and all of these pearls and these pieces of jewelry and these rubies, وأردية والتيجان, and these cloaks and these tiaras, التي يهبونها, that they were gifting to her, إنما يهبونها أنفسهم, they're really only gifting those things to themselves. So they're gifting it to her, but in reality they're giving those things to themselves. ليتمتعوا بمنظرها, in order that they could derive enjoyment from their appearance on her body. بمنظرها فوق جسمها كما يتمتع صاحب الكلب بمنظر القلادة في عنق قلبه. Similar to how the owner of a dog derives pleasure from seeing a necklace in the neck of its dog, a collar in the neck of its dog. وما له من ذلك من شيء, and the dog doesn't receive any benefit from that. فكأنما باعت عرضها, so it's as if she sold her dignity and honor free of charge and with no compensation whatsoever. بلا ثمن ولا جزاء. وكانت تخلو بنفسها حينا فتذكر, and she would sometimes spend some time in solitude with herself. فتذكر, and she would remember أن جميع هذه القلوب الطائرة, that all of these hearts that are flying around her, طائرة حولها, إنما تطير على جمالها, they're hovering over her beauty and not over her. لا عليها. وأنها إن حرمت هذا الجمال, and she would reflect that if she were to be deprived of that beauty even for a single moment, انفض الناس جميعا من حولها, the people would disperse, all of them would disperse from around her. وأصبحت وحيدة, and she'd be alone. منقطعة, cut off from this world. في هذا العالم لا يعطف عليها قلب, no heart would have compassion for her. ولا تبكي عليها عين, and no eye would cry over her. فتبكي, so when she would have these thoughts, it would result in her crying. فتبكي, so she would cry uncontrollably. بكاء الأشقياء على أنفسهم, similar to how people that are miserable and depressed cry for themselves. بل ترى أنها شقية مثلهم, in fact she would believe that she is miserable just like them. لأنها تعاشر من لا تحب, because she lives with people she does not love. وتحيا بين قوم, and she lives, تعاشر means she socializes with people that she does not love, and she lives among a people that do not love her except with false love. وتحيا بين قوم لا يحبونها إلا حبا كاذبا. وربما مرت Okay, this is nice. وربما مرت في بعض غدواتها أو روحاتها بغرفة حارس قصرها. And at certain times, sometimes she would pass in some of her afternoon walks or her evening walks, she would pass by the room of the security guard of her mansion. حارس قصرها وهو جالس بين زوجه, while he was sitting between his wife and his children. يمنحهم حبه وإخلاصه ويمنحونه من ذلك مثل ما يمنحهم. Okay, beautiful expression. I'll read that again. وربما مرت في بعض غدواتها أو روحاتها, and at certain times she would pass in some of her afternoon walks or in some of her evening walks, she would pass by بغرفة حارس قصرها, by the room of the security guard of her mansion. وهو جالس بين زوجه وأولاده, while he was sitting among his wife and his children. يمنحهم حبه وإخلاصه ويمنحونه من ذلك مثل ما يمنحهم. Him, while he is granting to them his love and his sincerity, and they are granting to him from that similar to what he grants to them. ويمنحونه من ذلك مثل ما يمنحهم. فتتمنى, so she would desire and wish, أن لو كان حظها من هذه الحياة غرفة كهذه الغرفة, that her allotted portion from this life was no more than a room like similar to this room, and a husband and children similar to this husband and these children. فتتمنى أن لو كان, this law is for tamanni, so she's wishing that if only she could have the same as what this person has. ثم لا تقتره على دهرها, and then she would not make any further request to the quote-unquote universe after that, and she'd be content and satisfied. وما رآها الناس في يوم من أيامها. Okay, this is another interesting paragraph. He said وما رآها الناس في يوم من أيامها استقبلت في قصرها رجلا متزوجا وخاطبا. And the people would never ever see in any day from all of her days, they never ever saw her welcoming within her mansion a married man or a person who's engaged. رجلا متزوجا وخاطبا. فكانوا يحملون هذا الأمر, so the people were interpreting this behavior from her على محمل الأثر, as motivated by selfishness. ويقولون, and they were saying, إنها امرأة طامعة, that she's a greedy woman. لا تحب إلا أن يكون عاشقها خالصا لها, that she does not prefer for her lover to be except totally devoted to her. She doesn't want to share her man with anyone. لا تحب إلا أن يكون عاشقها خالصا لها. ولو أنهم عرفوا حقيقة أمرها, and if they actually knew what was really in her heart and the reality of the matter, ولو أنهم عرفوا حقيقة أمرها وألموا بسريرة نفسها, and if they were to get a glimpse of the secret of her soul, لعلموا, then they would know أنها امرأة حزينة منكوبة, that she is a calamity-stricken, grieving woman. قد فجعها الدهر, that the universe has caused her grief. في سعادة الزوجية, in happiness of marriage. فعرفت قيمتها, so for that reason she recognizes the value of marriage. فهي لا تحب أن تفجع فيها امرأة غيرها, so it is for this reason she does not want to cause grief in this regard to any other woman. She's already suffered, she doesn't want other women to suffer. Okay, لقد تحدث بعض الذين ألموا بشؤون حياتها الخاصة, and some people that had received the glimpse of the affairs of her private life had this conversation between themselves, that وهبت مرتين, that she gifted a couple of times or maybe 3 times, بعض الفتيات الفقيرات مهورا, that she gifted some poor young girls dowries that they could use in order to secure for themselves marriage. يستعين بها على الزواج مما يريدن, that were wanting to get married but they didn't have any money, so she gave them the money that they could, create a means for themselves to be happily married. فلم يصدق الناس هذا الخبر, so the people did not believe this news. And they said that إن السالب لا يكون واهبا, that the person who takes cannot be a giver. The person who robs and a thief cannot be a giver. وقالوا إن السالب لا يكون واهبا وإن ينبوع الخير, and the spring of good and virtue is not possible for it to gush forth within the hearts of wicked women. وإن ينبوع الخير لا يمكن أن ينفجر في قلوب النساء الفاجرات ولكن الحقيقة, however, the reality is that she did do this, and perhaps she did a lot more than this. ولكن الحقيقة أنها فعلت ذلك وربما فعلت أكثر منه. هذا هو قلب Marguerite, and this was Marguerite's heart. وهذه هي سريرة نفسها, and this was the secret of her soul. فهي فتاة فاسدة, so she was a corrupt young girl. ولكنها غير راضية عن فسادها, however, she was not content with her corruption. وساقطة, and she was fallen. ولكنها لا تحب, however, she did not want and she did not like to see other girls fall similar to her. أن ترى الفتيات ساقطات مثلها. ولو كان في استطاعة المرأة الساقطة, and if the fallen woman was capable of bringing back through her repentance and through her rectifying her behavior, if she was able to bring back her position that she once had within the hearts of men, within the hearts of people, وأن تمحو بصلاحها ما سلف من فسادها, and if she was able to wipe away through her righteousness all of the previous corruption, then she would have been the closest of all women to repentance and stopping that behavior and ceasing and desisting. When nuzuri and going cold turkey, like nuzur, like cutting off from that lifestyle, she would have done it in a heartbeat. Okay, ولو كان في استطاعة, I'll reread that again. ولو كان في استطاعة المرأة الساقطة أن تسترجع بتوبتها وإنابتها مكانتها. So this مكانتها is the object of تسترجع, to bring back her makana, her position, her place in society. في قلوب, her place in the hearts of people, her honor, her respect, her reputation. I think مكانتها means reputation. وأن تمحو, and this is ma'atuf on tastarja. In other words, if it was within the capability of a fallen woman to do this and to do this, and to wipe away through her righteousness all of the corruption that had passed, ma salafa min fasadiha, lakanat hiya, then she, okay, with emphasis on the she, then she would have been the closest of women to repentance and the closest of women to nuzur, and to stop that behavior. ولكن المجتمع, however, the society الذي أسقطها, that had caused her to fall, وسلبها ذلك الرداء من الشرف الذي كانت ترتديه, and had robbed her of that cloak of honor that she was wearing, كانت ترتديه, يأبى عليها, this society refuses to return it back to her, أن يعيد إليها, to return back to her that garment, even if she wants it. إن طلبته فلا بد لها, so she has no choice but to continue forward in her fallen state. فلا بد لها من الاستمرار في سقوطها راضية, willingly or unwillingly, راضية أو كارهة, وكذلك كان شأنها, and this is exactly what happened, and this was her way forward. This was her fare moving forward. Okay, and then it talks about her sickness and her illness, and then she meets a gentleman, like an elderly gentleman whose daughter passed away. And that daughter bared a striking resemblance to Marguerite, to the point that every time he saw Marguerite, it would console him and it would give him a relief. So this old man strikes up a relationship with Marguerite, not like an illicit kind of, intimate one, but just as a compassionate one. So he proposes to her to leave that lifestyle, the lifestyle of prostitution and everything else that she was engaged in, and instead live in a dwelling that the Duke would provide for her, with the condition that he can go visit her and meet her and just enjoy her company from time to time, and she agrees to that. Okay, so we're going to do this in our next session, so let me know what you thought, and I'm going to stop the video here, and we'll see you inshallah in the next session. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay, so welcome back everyone to second session. So continuing, he says, وَلَمْ يَمْضِ عَلَى مَرْغَرِيتِ فِي حَيَاتِهَا هَذِهِ أكثر من بضعة عوام ولم يمضي على مرغريت في حياتها هذه أكثر من بضعة عوام حتى نزل بها مرض حجبها في بيتها عدة أيام ثم اشتد عليها. And within this particular life of Marguerite, more than a few years did not pass. ولم يمضي. More than a few years. So this أكثر من بضعة عوام is the fa'il for the verb. لم يمضي. Did not pass. What didn't pass? أكثر من بضعة عوام did not pass. More than a few years did not pass. That نزل بها مرض. That a particular illness afflicted her. حجبها. That concealed her to her home. Confined her to her home. عدة أيام for a number of days. ثم اشتد عليها, and then this sickness became severe and intensified. فأشار عليها الأطباء, so the doctors recommended to her أن تذهب إلى حمامات بانيير, to go to the spas and to the resort facilities of a place called Pioneer. Okay, Banier, I guess would be Pioneer, somewhere near Paris. للإستشفاء, in order to rejuvenate, بمائها وهوائها, through its water and through its atmosphere and its air. فسافرت إليها وحدها, so she traveled to this location by herself. لا تصحبها إلا خادمتها, the only person accompanying her in this journey was her maidservant. إلا خادمتها. وكان في ذلك المصطاف, and at that summer resort, during that year, في هذا العام, there was already a شيخ من الأثرياء, an affluent, wealthy old man, اسمه الدوق موهان, whose name was Duq Mohan. حضر إليها, he had arrived at the same place, مع ابنته, with his daughter. وكانت مريضة بداء الصدر, and this daughter of the Duke's daughter, was ill and sick with some kind of chest disease. بداء الصدر. ليستشفي لها من دائها, so that he can receive some kind of cure for his daughter from her illness. فلم يجدها العلاج, so the treatment did not avail her, did not benefit her. وماتت بين يديه فدفنها هناك, and she died in front of him. So he buried her there. وَلَبِثَ بَعْدَ مَوْتِهَا عِدَّةَ أَيَّامٍ, and he remained there after her death for a few days. يَخْتَلِفُ إِلَىٰ قَبْرِهَا, going visiting her grave frequently. وَيَبْكِيهَا بُكَاءً شَدِيدًا, and crying at her grave uncontrollably. بُكَاءً شَدِيدًا. فَإِنَّهُ لَا عَائِدٌ مِنَ الْمَقْبَرَةِ, so he was returning back from the graveyard, from the cemetery. ذات يوم, one day, إذ لمح في طريقه مرغريت سائرة وحدها, that lo and behold, all of a sudden, he saw in his path Marguerite walking by herself. سائرة وحدها. وكان ذلك اليوم الثانية, and that was the second day of her arrival to Pioneer. من وصولها إلى البانير. فدهش لمنظرها دهشة عظمى. So he was awe-stricken, and he was shocked when he saw her, like to an unimaginable degree. وَخُيِّلَ إِلَيْهِ أَنَّ اللَّهَ قَدْ بَعَثَ لَهُ ابْنَتَهُ, and he imagined that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had resurrected from the grave his daughter, min qabriha, resurrected for him his daughter from her grave. أَوْ أَرْسَلَ إِلَيْهَا خِيَالَهَا, or that Allah has sent to him an image of his daughter, لِيُعَزِّيَهُ, in order to comfort and console him and make it easy for him to bear this loss. لِمَكَانِ الشَّبَهِ, due to the resemblance that was there, بَيْنَ سُورَةِ هَذِهِ الْفَتَاةِ وَسُورَتِهَا, between the image and the appearance of this girl and between the image and appearance of Marguerite. فَتَقَدَّمَ نَحْوَهَا, so he approached her. ذَاهِلًا مَدْهُوشًا, not quite like in a faint, like out of his senses, in a zombie-like fashion. he approached her, مشدوها, unaware of his surroundings. وأمسك بالطرف ردائها, and he grabbed onto the corner of Marguerite's shawl or cloak. وظل يحدق في وجهها تحديقا طويلا. وظل يحدق في وجهها تحديقا طويلا فعجبت لشأنه وسألته. And he started, and he began ظل, and he began staring into her face for like a long period of time, like staring directly at her face. فعجبت لشأنه, so she was startled by what's happening. وسألته, and Marguerite asked him, ما باله, that what's the issue, what's wrong with him. فقال لها, so he said to her, هل تأذنين لي يا سيدتي أن أقبل يدك, do you permit me, my lady, that I kiss your hand. فمدت إليه يدها, so Marguerite extended her hand to him. وهي لا تعلم ماذا يريد, and she was not aware what exactly he wants. ولا ما الذي أصابه, and what calamity has actually befallen him. فلسمها, so he kissed it. ثم اعتذر إليها, and then immediately he began explaining himself and giving an excuse for his strange behavior. عن جرأته بذهوله ودهشته, and that was being done in this absent-minded state of shock and awe. Okay, let me reread that. Okay, it was pretty powerful few sentences there. Okay, so he said فإنه لعائد من المقبرة, he was returned back from the cemetery ذات يوم إذ لمح في طريقه مارغريت سائرة وحدها, walking by herself. وكان ذلك اليوم الثانية, and that was the second day, من وصولها إلى البانير. فدهش لمنظرها دهشة عظمى. وخيل إليه أن الله قد بعث له ابنته, and he imagined that Allah has sent to him his daughter من قبرها, from her grave. أو أرسل إليه خيالها ليعزيه عنها لمكان الشبه بين صورة هذه الفتاة وصورتها, resemblance between the two, the appearance of this girl and the appearance of his daughter. فتقدم نحوها ذاهلا مدهوشا, absent-mindedly and in a state of shock and awe, he approached her. وأمسك بطرف ردائها وظل يحدق في وجهها تحديقا طويلا. So this is from the pupil. حدق is the part of the eye. So the verb is constructed from that noun. حدق يحدق, it means to stare at something. So he's staring at her face for a long period of time. فعجبت لشأنه, she finds this strange and she's startled. وسألت ما باله, what's his issue? فقال لها, so he asked permission and he says هل تأذنين لي يا سيدتي أن أقبل يدك. قبل يقبل means to kiss. فمدت إليه يدها وهي لا تعلم ماذا يريد, and she doesn't quite understand what he wants. ولا ما الذي أصابه, and what is it that's afflicted him. فلثمها, this is لثمها. You see, I was able to read that. So لثمة, it's like he kissed, he started embracing and kissing Marguerite's hand. ثم اعتذر إليها, and then he gave his excuse of his strange behavior. بذهوله ودهشته. ومشى معها, and he walked with her. يقص عليها قصته وقصة مصابه في ابنته, telling her his story and the story of his affliction concerning his daughter. وما راعه من الشبه بين صورتها وصورتها, and what startled him, and what راعة is like startled, surprised, with a bit of fear. It's from ro. Ro means like terror and fear. And what startled him concerning the resemblance between her appearance and her appearance. بين صورتها وصورتها. فرثت له, so she pitied him. وحزنت لحزنه, and she grieved because of his grief. واستهلت دمعة, and a tear began forming. رآها الشيخ من خلال أحداب عينيها المبتلة بالدموع, which the sheikh, the old man, saw from the edges of her eyelashes that were moist with tears. فسقط على يدها, so that tear then fell on her hand. يقبلها, so he dropped down and kissed the tear, or kissed her hand. ويشكر لها تلك الدمعة التي جادت بها عليه في ساعة شقائه, thanking her kissing it and thanking her for that tear that she was generous with and she bestowed to him in the hour of his misery, in the hour of his hardship. وَلَمْ يَزَلْ سَائِرًا مَعَهَا حَتَّى وَصَلَ إِلَى النُّزُلِ. And the two of them continued, and he continued walking with her. He continued walking with her until the two of them reached the hotel. وَصَلَ إِلَى النُّزُلِ, reached the resort. فَوَدَّعَهَا, so he bid farewell to her. وَمَضَى بَعْدَمَا اسْتَأْذَنَهَا أَنْ يَخْتَلِفَ إِلَيْهَا مِنْ حِينٍ إِلَى حِينٍ. And he went on his way after having received permission from her to visit her from time to time. مِنْ حِينٍ إِلَى حِينٍ فَأَذِنَتْهُ بِذَلِكَ وَسَعِدَتْ إِلَى غُرْفَتِهَا. So she permitted him, and then she went up to her room. فَلَمَّا خَلَتْ بِنَفْسِهَا, so when she was alone by herself, أنشأت تفكر في أمر تلك الفتاة المسكينة, she began reflecting and thinking of that poor young girl, التي اختطفها الموت, that death had snatched her away from the hand of her father in the flower of her youth. في زهرة صباها من حيث لم يستطع طبيب, such that no doctor was able, nor was any visitor able to رد دعاية القضاء عنها, to thwart the call of divine decree from her. ثم خطر لها أنها مريضة بمثل المرض الذي ماتت به. And then the thought occurred to her that she too is sick with the same illness with which that girl passed away. وأنها ربما ماتت موتتها. And perhaps she may also die the same death as that girl. فلا تجد بجانبها, then she will not find at her side أبا, any father, كهذا الأب, a father similar to this father, يندبها, that could eulogize her, ويبكي عليها, and cry for her. فأثر في نفسها هذا الخاطر تأثيرا شديدا. So this thought really affected her in an intense way. وبكت له بكاء طويلا, and she cried because of it for a long period of time. ولزمت غرفتها في ذلك اليوم, and that whole day she just stayed in her room, لا تفارقها, not leaving the room. وظل الدوق, and the duke, يختلف إليها بعد ذلك, would visit her repeatedly, فيجالسها طويلا, and sit with her for long periods of time. ويجد من الأنس بها والاغتباط بعيشتها ما تسكن به لوعة نفسه كلما شبه الوجد في صدره. Okay, there seems to be like a typo here. That ha pronoun doesn't make sense. So, okay, so let's try to figure this out. So he's saying that the duke would visit her. اختلف إليه means to come more than once, like repeatedly. Would visit her repeatedly after that. So he would sit with her for long periods, and he would find a level of companionship and a sense of happiness by socializing with her. بعيشتها, that would through which would subside the pain in his soul every time the pain in his chest would resurface. Every time it would get like a little intense, he would go and treat himself by visiting Marguerite. حتى أصبح لا يستطيع مفارقتها, until one morning he was not able. It doesn't mean morning, it just means became. Until he became in need, and he couldn't stay away from her for even a single hour. لا يستطيع مفارقتها ساعة واحدة وكأنما لذ لها أن يرى ذلك الشيخ الثاكل المنكوب في وجهها سلوته وعزاءه. Okay, let me reread that. وكأنما لذ لها أن يرى ذلك الشيخ الثاكل أن يرى ذلك الشيخ الثاكل المنكوب في وجهها سلوته وعزاءه فمنحته من عطفها وحبها ما لم تمنحه أحدا من قبله وأنست به أنسا لم تأنسه بإنسان سواه. And it was as if it was as if it was pleasurable for her as well. In other words, Marguerite was getting a sense of satisfaction from this. From what? From the fact that this bereaved, grief-stricken old man is seeing in her face his consolation and his condolence. فَمَنَحَتْهُ, so she granted to him from her own compassion and her love such that she did not grant anyone before. The kind of love, the kind of compassion, and the kind of love she gave to him that she never gave to anyone before. Okay, فَمَنَحَتْهُ مِنْ عِطْفِهَا وَحُبِّهَا. So this min is clarifying the vagueness of the upcoming ma. So it's like مَا لَمْ تَمْنَحْهُ مِنْ عِطْفِهَا وَحُبِّهَا. And these verbs are all obviously feminine verbs because the subject is her. فَمَنَحَتْهُ. So she granted to him of her love and of her compassion that which she did not grant to anyone before him. وَأَنِسَتْ بِهِ. And she felt a sense of familiarity with him that she did not feel with any human before. وَأَنِسَتْ بِهِ أُنْسًا لَمْ تَأْنَسْهُ بِإِنسَانٍ سِوَاهُ وَمَا هِيَ إِلَّا أَيَّامٌ قَلَائِلٌ. And it was only a few days. حَتَّى أَبَلَّتْ مِنْ مَرَضِهَا بَعْدَ الْإِبْلَالِ. That she received a bit of relief from her illness and she recovered. وَعَادَ إِلَى وَجْهِهَا الْجَمِيلِ رَوْنَقُهُ وَبَهَاؤُهُ. And it was only a few days that she recovered from her illness somewhat. And to her beautiful face returned its luster and its brightness and its glow. وَإِلَى ثَغْرِهَا الْبَدِيعِ. And to her beautiful lips, ابتسامه وافتراره. Her smile, the smile returned to her lips and the beauty of that smile. Okay, وافتراره. فلذ لها المقام في البانير أيام طوالا. So remaining in Pioneer for long days was pleasurable to her. حتى شعرت بهبوب رياح الشتاء. Until she sensed the blowing of the winds of winter. فأزعمت العودة إلى باريس. So she decided and she resolved to return back to Paris. فشق ذلك على الدوق. So this was hard to bear and difficult for the Duke. وعلم أنها إن عادت إليها. And he knew that if she was to return back to Paris, لا يظفر منها في ذلك المزدحم العظيم الحافل بخلانها وأصدقائها بمثل ما كان يظفر به منها في البانير. And he was afraid, and he knew that if she was to return back to Paris, then he would not be able to receive the kind of attention. He would not be able to receive from her any attention. Dhafira means to win. He would not win with her. He would not be able to receive companionship with her in that crowded, large society that's full of her friends and her lovers, the kind of attention he's able to receive from her here in Pioneer. فَخَلَّى بِهَا لَيْلَةَ السَّفَرِ سَاعَةً. So he stayed back with her one night. On the night when she was planning to journey the next morning, he spent some time with her, an hour. وَحَادَثَهَا حَدِيثًا طَوِيلًا. And he had a lengthy conversation with her. انتهى بالاتفاق معها, which ended in agreement with her that she will leave behind her former life. على أن تهجر حياتها الأولى حياة المخالة, the life of loving and mingling and socializing with these people. وتعيش في منزل, and she will live in a home يهيئه لها, that the Duke would prepare for her, and the Duke would take care of all of her expenses. ويقوم بنفقاتها فيه على أن تأذن له بالاختلاف إليها, with the sole condition that she permits him to frequently visit her from time to time. من حين إلى حين ثم سافرا في اليوم الثاني إلى باريس. Then the two of them traveled together the next day to Paris. ومنذ ذلك اليوم تغيرت صورة حياتها عما كانت عليه من قبل. And from that day, her life transformed and changed from how it was earlier. عما كانت عليه من قبل. فأصبحت تعيش في قصرها. So she was living in her mansion. الذي هيأه لها الدوق عيشا, that the Duke had prepared for her, a life that was somewhere between isolation and mingling. بين العزلة والاختلاط فلا تستقبل الناس فيه إلا قليلا. So she would not welcome people into her home except a little. ولا تمتزج مع الذين تستقبلهم الامتزاج كله. And those that she did welcome into her home, she would not mix with them completely and fully. وربما مرت بها أيام, and often days would pass by, لا يراها الناس خارج قصرها إلا قليلا, that the people would not see her outside her mansion except for brief periods of time. فإذا خرجت, so when she would come out, ركبت عربتها, she would board her carriage by herself, وحدها دون رفيق أو رفيقة, without any companion, male or female. ومشت في طريقها تقرأ في كتاب أو صحيفة, and she would walk in her path reading either a book or some magazine. فربما مر بها كثير ممن تعرفهم, so oftentimes many of those people that she recognized would pass by. فلا تراهم, she would not even notice them. فلا تراهم. فإذا وقع نظرها على واحد منهم, so when her sight would fall on one of those people, ابتسمت له ابتسامة قصيرة موجزة, she would smile to that person, a brief and short smile that hardly anyone else would notice. قلما يشعر بها أحد سواه, except that individual. ثم استمرت أدراجها, and then she'd continue on her way حتى تصل منتزه Champs-Élysées, until she reached the Champs-Élysées park. منتزه means park. فتنزل من عربتها, she would come down from her carriage, وتمشي في الغابة, and walk around in the forest على قدميها, on foot, ساعة, for an hour. ثم تعود إلى قصرها, and then she'd return back to her mansion. فإذا جاء الليل ذهبت إلى ملعب التمثيل وحدها, and when night would approach, she would go to the theater by herself, وحدها, أو مع الرجل القائم بشأنها, or with the man who was in charge of her affairs, or you could say her bodyguard. فتقضي فيه أكثر وقتها, so she would spend the majority of her time in the theater, ناظرة إلى المسرح, looking at the stage. لا يشغلها كثرة الناظرين إليها, the sheer number of the people that are looking at her and trying to communicate with her, whispering to her, متهافتين على مقصورتها, that are, sending, calling out to her, sitting in her theater box, مقصورتها. That abundance would not distract her. لا يشغلها. And عن تتبع, distract her from what? From following following the scenes within the episode. فصول الرواية, the scenes of the narration. والاهتمام بواقعها حتى تنتهي, and concentrating on the theme of the story, of the play or whatever performance is being done on the stage. حتى تنتهي, until it would finish. فلم تمضي عليها أيام كثيرة, not a whole lot of days passed, حتى علم الناس جميعا, that all of the people collectively came to know that Marguerite قد استحالت حالها, her situation has changed, وتغيرت صورة حياتها, and her life has transformed, وأنها قد قنعت بهذه الحياة الجديدة, حياة الهدوء والسكينة, and that she is now content and satisfied with this new life, the life of calm and peace. والوحشة, and isolation, والانفرادي means the same thing. ورضيتها لنفسها, and she's happy with that for herself. فلا سبيل إلى مغالبتها, so there's no way to overpower her against her will. فقصرت عنها أطماعهم, so their desires are now tapered, and people are no longer covetous about trying to create a relationship with her. وانقطعت منها آمالهم, and their hopes are now cut off. وظلوا يلتمسون الأسباب لتلك الحالة الغريبة, and they're all trying to investigate and figure out the causes for this strange situation, لتلك الحالة الغريبة التي طرأت عليها, that has taken over her. فذهبوا في شأنها المذاهب كلها, so they entertained all possibilities with respect to her affair except the correct one. إلا المذهب الصحيح منها, وهي أن تلك الحادثة المحزنة, and the real reason for the transformation is as follows, that particular grieving incident that had befallen the Duke's daughter, in other words, the one that resembled her so closely in her appearance and also in her sickness, قد أثرت, that incident had affected her deeply. قد أثرت في نفسها تأثيرا شديدا. Okay, let me reread this whole paragraph. فلم تمضي عليها أيام كثيرة حتى علم الناس جميعا أن مارغريت قد استحالت حالها وتغيرت صورة حياتها وأنها قد قنعت, and that she is now content بهذه الحياة الجديدة, with this new life, حياة الهدوء والسكينة والوحشة والانفراد, ورضيتها لنفسها, and she's happy with it for herself. فلا سبيل إلى مغالبتها عليها, so there's no point trying to get her to change and trying to overpower her against her will. فقصرت عنها أطماعهم, so their desires and their covetousness was tapered. قصرت means fell short. وانقطعت منها آمالهم وظلوا يلتمسون الأسباب, and they began seeking out causes and explanations لتلك الحالة الغريبة التي طرأت عليها. فذهبوا في شأنها المذاهب كلها إلا المذهب الصحيح منها. So they entertained, with respect to her situation, all possible interpretations other than the correct one. وهي أن تلك الحادثة المحزنة التي حدثت لابنة الدوق شبيهتها في صورتها ومرضها قد أثرت في نفسها تأثيرا شديدا, has affected her deeply. وصورت لها الحياة بصورة غير صورتها الأولى, and has transformed life itself to some other form than what she knew of it earlier. فأصبحت تعافى الرجال, so now she is repulsed by men. لأنهم سبب سقوطها, because men are the very reason for her falling in the first place. وتستنكر سقوطها أكثر مما استنكرته من قبل, and she's more hateful of her previous fall, than she ever was in the past. لأنه سبب مرضها, because it was her fall, in other words, falling in sin, that became the reason for her sickness. ولا تأسف على ما فاتها مما في أيدي الناس, and she is not regretful on what she's losing from what's in the hands of people. In other words, the wealth. لأنها تعيش من مال الدوق, because she's living off the wealth of the Duke. في نعمة, in a state of blessing. لا يطمع طامع في أكثر منها, that no desiring person could desire more than what she already has. وربما خطر لها أن حياتها مع هذا الشيخ الهرم الذي لا يطمع منها في أكثر من أن يراها تشبه حياة العذارى الطاهرات اللواتي ينعمن بنعمة الشرف في ظلال آبائهن. And at certain times it would occur to her, خطر لها, the thought would occur to her that her present life with this old elderly man, al-Shaykh al-Harim, that has no desire from her in more than merely seeing her. All he wants is to see her, be able to see her. تشبه حياة, that this life, it resembles the life of virgin, pure, innocent women that enjoy comfort and luxury in the blessings of sharaf and honor within the shade of their parents. فأعجبها هذا الخيال. So this thought would please her and make her happy for an instant. وَلَظَّ لَهَا, and she derived pleasure from it. وَكَثِيرًا مَا بَكَتْ وَكَثِيرًا مَا, and many times, and this ma is extraneous. وَكَثِيرًا مَا بَكَتْ ذَلِكَ الشَّرَفْ قَبْلَ الْيَوْمِ وَحَنَتْ إِلَيْهِ, and oftentimes she would cry for this honor before today, and she would want it very much. وَحَنَتْ إِلَيْهِ, and she would incline towards it or want it very much. Okay, moving on. It says, انقضت أيام الخريف, the days of autumn ended. وأقبلت أيام الشتاء, and the days of winter approached. وسالت الأجواء, and the winds were now blowing بردا, with cold and dryness. وقرا, بردا وقرا. فثار ما كان كامنا من داء مارغريت. So what was hidden from the illness of Marguerite resurfaced. وعاد إليها نفثها وسعالها, and her sneezing and coughing came back with a vengeance. فظلت تكابد من مرضها آلاما جساما, so she was experiencing great pain from her illness. كابد يكاتب means to endure. So she began enduring from her illness آلاما جساما, great pain. لا تفارقها يوما, that do not separate from her for a single day, except to return back for many days. So they go away for a day and then return back for many days. لا تفارقها يوما حتى تعاودها أياما فإن ألمت بها لزمت سريرها. So when those fits of coughing and sneezing would visit her, alamma means to visit, would visit her, she would become bedridden. لا تفارقه, not moving away from the bed. وإن روحت عنها, and if they would temporarily go away, برزت إلى الخلاء, she would come out to the open. في بكور الأيام وأصائلها, in the mornings and in the evenings. In the mornings, في بكور الأيام وأصائلها, and in the evenings, تطلب الهواء الطلق, in order to seek clean air, والجو النقي, and in a clear atmosphere. وربما ذهبت في بعض لياليها إلى ملعب التمثيل, and at certain times she would go at certain nights to the theater لتتفرج, in order to rejuvenate and in order to receive some relief of the pain that she's experiencing. ما هي فيه فتخلو بنفسها في مقصورتها, so she would spend time alone in her theater box, ساعة أو ساعتين, for an hour or for 2 hours. ثم تعود إلى منزلها, and then she'd return back to her home. وكانت لا تزال ترى في المقصورة المجاورة لمقصورتها كلما ذهبت إلى الملعب, and she would always see in the theater box adjacent to her own theater box. Every time she would go to the theater, she would see a young man في زي أبناء الأشراف, that looked like a gentleman, وشمائلهم, and had good etiquette, and he seemed like a noble person. لا يزال يخالصها النظرة, constantly trying to steal a glance at her, من حين إلى حين, from time to time. فينظر إليها, he would look to her, إن غضت عنه, when she would be looking in some other direction, or when she'd be looking down away from him. ويقضي عنها إن نظرت إليه, and he would turn away from her if she looks to him. ولا يلتقي نظرها بنظره, and her glance would not meet with his glance, except that it would result in his face becoming, like he would blush with redness. يلتهب وجهه حمرة ويرفض جبينه عرقا, and his forehead would begin perspirating with sweat. كأنما جنى جناية, as if he committed a crime for which there's no expiation. لا مقيل له منها, like unforgivable crime. فلم تحفل به كثيرا, so Marguerite never really paid too much attention to this. لأنها لم ترى في أمره شيئا جديدا, because she didn't see in this young man's behavior anything new. إلا أنها كانت تعجبه, except for the fact that she would be startled by his sukun and his jumud, by his stillness and by how calm he was, his frozenness. وطول إغضائه وإطراقه, and the sheer length of how long he would just look down and he would stare. وإطراقه, and he'd tilt his head down. ولتلك العبرة من الحزن, this should be غبرة. Now Abra doesn't mean, Abra means tear, like the title of the book, Abarat. And for that tear of grief, no, this is ghabara, for that cloud, for that thin cloud of grief that spread over his face. المنتشرة على وجهه, وكان أكثر ما يدهشها منه, and the thing that most shocked her regarding this man, أو يعجبها, or the thing that really amazed her, أنه الفتى الوحيد الذي كان يبكي في ذلك المجتمع, that he is the single young man in that entire society that would actually cry. لمنظر المشاهد المحزنة, when seeing sad scenes التي تمثل, that are being represented on the stage, على مسرح التمثيل, on the theater stage. لأنها تعلم, because she knew that أن الفتيان الفرحين المختبطين بشبابهم وصحتهم, and she knew that the young men that are joyous and happy and content with their youth and with their health do not care about scenes of actual misery, let alone be bothered about the representation of misery that happens on stage. It wouldn't move them, but yet this person is being moved by acting, and it's not even real life misery, it's scenes of tragedy that are being acted out on the stage. Okay, so let me reread that again. فلم تحفل به كثيرا, so she would not think too much of this. لأنها لم تر في أمره شيئا جديدا إلا أنها كانت تعجب or تعجب. It's like تتعجب, remove one of the two ta's, it becomes تعجب. It means to be astonished. لسكونه وجموده وطول إغضائه وإطرافه ولتلك الغبرة من الحزن المنتشرة على وجهه. So she was startled by that cloud of حزن, of grief that was spread over his face. وكان أكثر ما يدهشها, and the thing that startled her the most, وكان أكثر ما يدهشها منه أو يعجبها أنه الفتى الوحيد الذي كان يبكي في ذلك المجتمع. مجتمع means society. لمنظر المشاهد المحزنة, due to the scenes of the sad scenes. مشاهد means scenes. التي تمثل, that are being represented and played out and acted على مسرح التمثيل. لأنها تعلم أن الفتيان الفرحين المغتبطين بشبابهم وصحتهم لا يحفلون بمناظر الشقاء الحقيقية, فأحرى ألا يحفلوا بتمثيلها. So it makes more sense. فأحرى means it's more likely that they would not be bothered by the representation of those scenes of misery. Okay. فإنها لخالية بنفسها في مقصورتها ذات ليلة. So one night she was by herself, spending time in her theater box one night. وكان الجو باردا مقشعرا, and the weather was cold, particularly cold, مقشعرا. إذ فاجأتها نوبة السعال. So she was overtaken. فاجأ means like out of nowhere. Out of nowhere she was hit by a fit of coughing. نوبة سعال اشتدت عليها كثيرا, that became very intense very quickly. حتى كادت تسقط, to the point that she almost fell from her seat. عن كرسيها ضعفا ووهنا, out of weakness and frailty. فشعرت بيد تمسك يدها, so she sensed a hand holding her hand. فاعتمدت عليها, so with the help of that hand she propped herself up دون أن تستطيع الالتفات إلى صاحبها, without being able to look to who that person was. So she sensed the hand, but she wasn't able to see who it was. حتى بلغت عربتها, until she reached her carriage. فركبتها, and she boarded it. فشعرت بالراحة قليلا, so she sensed a bit of relief. فالتفتت, and she turned around. لتشكر لصاحب تلك اليد يده, in order to thank the person who gave that hand for his favor. So he's using the word hand in two different meanings. لصاحب تلك اليد يده. فلم ترى أمامها أحدا, so she did not see in front of her anyone. ورأت على بعد خطوات منها إنسانا منصرفا, and she saw at a distance of a few feet from her a man going away, moving in the opposite direction. منصرفا. فلم تتمكن من رؤيته, so she was not able to see him. إلا أنها تخيلت صورته تخيلا, except that she imagined his appearance somewhat. فعجبت لأمره, she was like surprised by what she saw. ومضت في طريقها, and she just kept going. فما وصلت إلى منزلها, and then she barely reached her place of residence. حتى شعرت برعدة الحمى تتمشى في أعضائها, that she sensed the shiver or the violent shake of fever like moving through her entire body. فلزمت سريرها بضعة أيام, so she stayed in her bed for a number of days. لا تفارقه, not leaving the bed at all. حتى أبلت قليلا, until she received a little relief. And this Abella came earlier as well. Recovered a little. فَقَدَّمَتْ إِلَيْهَا خَادِمَتُهَا بِطَاقَاتِ الزِّيَارَةِ. So the maidservant forwarded to her the visitor cards left behind by the young men that were visiting her during the days of her illness. تَجَمُّلًا, as a fake courtesy and because of guilt. وَتَلَوُّمًا, people would feel the need to go visit her because maybe they knew her in her past life, so they're leaving behind visitor cards. Okay, so let me reread that. فَلَزِمَتْ سَرِيرَهَا بِضْعَةَ أَيَّامٍ لَا تُفَارِقُهُ حَتَّى أَبَلَّتْ قَلِيلًا فَقَدَّمَتْ إِلَيْهَا خَادِمَتُهَا بِطَاقَاتِ الزِّيَارَةِ التي تركها الفتيان الذين زاروها في أثناء مرضها تجملا وتلوما فلم تقرأ واحدة منها. So she did not read even one of them. ثم حدثتها الخادم, and then the maidservant informed her and told her أن فتى, that a particular young man كان يأتي للسؤال عنها, would come in order to ask about her في كل يوم مرة أو مرتين, every day at least once or twice. ولا يذكر اسمه, and he never used to mention his name. ولا يترك بطاقته, nor would he leave behind a visitor card. وأنه كان ينقبض انقباضا شديدا كلما أخبرته أنها لا تزال طريحة فراشها تشكو وتتألم. And he would shiver and have a visceral kind of reaction every time she would inform him that she, meaning Marguerite, is still bedridden. طريحة فراشها means she's lying flat on her bed, bedridden. تشكو, feeling pain, and not complaining. It means that she's suffering and she's feeling pain. فاستوصفتها إياه فوصفته. What do you think that means? فاستوصفتها إياه فوصفته لها. So she asked her to describe him. So she asked her to describe him. So the she is فاستوصفت. And the seeking and the asking is coming from the sin and the ta. Wasafa yasifu means to describe. Istawsafa means to seek description. So she sought from the maid that young man's description. فَوَصَفَتْهُ, so she described him to her. فَلَمْ تَعْرِفُ, so by that verbal description she wasn't able to recognize. وَعَجِبَتْ لِأَمْرِهِ كُلَّ الْعَجَبِ, but she was really, really surprised and startled by this. وَتَمَنَّتْ لَوْ رَأَتْهُ, and she desired and wished to see him. فَشَكَرَتْ لَهُ هَذَا الْإِخْلَاصِ, so that she could thank him for this sincerity, for this rare sincerity. هذا الإخلاص النادر الذي لا أحد لها به في أحد من الناس, that she had never experienced before in any of the people. وأمرت خادمتها, and she instructed her maid to inform her of the man's news, the young man's news. إن جاء للسؤال عنها مرة أخرى, if he were to come again in order to ask about her again, مرة أخرى. فلم يلبث أن جاء, long period of time did not pass that he came. وكانت مرغريت جالسة في شرفة المنزل المطلة على الطريق, and Marguerite was sitting in the balcony of her room that was overlooking the path. شرفة المنزل, شرفة means balcony, المطلة means overlooking the طريق. فرأته, she saw him, فعرفت أنه ذلك الفتى الحزين, and she immediately recognized that that's the same young grieving man, grieving boy that she saw in the theater box, adjacent to her theater box at the theater. كانت تراه في المقصورة المجاورة لمقصورتها في ملعب التمثيل, وأنه صاحب تلك اليد التي امتدت لمعونتها ليلة النازلة التي نزلت بها هناك, and that he is the person whose hand it was that extended to help her on the night of the calamity that befell her there, on the night of that particular calamity that afflicted her there at the theater. فأشارت إلى خادمتها بالنزول إليه, so she gestured to the maidservant that she's wanting to come down, to go down to him. In other words, she told her khadima to go down and bring him up. واستدعائه إليها, and send a request to him. واستدعائه, and send ففعلت واستدعائه, and to call him to her, to call him to her. ففعلت فاضطرب الفتى لهذه الدعوة اضطرابا شديدا. So the young man shook because of this, was startled and surprised by this invitation very much. حتى كاد يرفضها, to the point that he almost declined. يرفضها. ثم شعر بمكان مارغريت من الشرفة, and then he sensed Marguerite's presence in the balcony. فتلوم, so he felt guilty, and out of courtesy ومشى وراء الخادمة, he walked behind the maidservant حتى صعدت به إلى غرفة سيدتها, until he climbed up to the room of her lady. فتركته, so the maidservant left him, وانصرفت, and went off. فدخل عليها فحياها, so he entered on her and he greeted her. ووجهه يرفض عرقا, and his face was dripping in sweat. وَلِسَانُهُ لَا يَكَادُ يُبِينُ, and he wasn't able to speak clearly because he was very anxious and nervous. فَمَدَّتْ إِلَيْهِ يَدَهَا, so she extended to him her hand. فَتَنَاوَلَهَا, and so he received it. وَقَبَّلَهَا قُبْلَةً طَوِيلَةً, and he kissed it with a very long kiss. عرفت Marguerite سر ما أودعها من عواطف قلبه. Marguerite was immediately able to recognize the secret of everything he had, the secret of all of the emotions of her heart that he had deposited into the kiss. وهي العالمة بأسرار القبلات, and by the way, Marguerite knows all of the secrets of kisses. ثم أذنته بالجلوس, and then she granted him permission to sit. فجلس, so he sat. فأنشأت تسائله عن نفسه وعن قومه, so she began asking him questions about himself and about his people, about his family. وعن سبب اهتمامه بشأنها, and of the real reason why he cares so much for her affair. وتبتسم له فيما بين ذلك, and in between all of that conversation she would smile, she would bestow upon him certain smiles that would comfort him and console him and make it easy for him and move away from his heart the anxiousness that he was experiencing. Okay, relieve from his heart the anxiousness, wipe away from his heart the anxiousness that was visiting him. ما ألم به. Okay, let me reread this. Okay, actually we should go back and reread most of this. I mean, this is pretty engaging, isn't it? What do you think? Post in the comments, let me know. Okay. Okay, let's go back to here. ثم شعر بمكان مارغريت من الشرفة, he sensed Marguerite's presence in the balcony. فتلوم ومشى, so out of courtesy he walked behind the خادمة حتى صعدت به إلى غرفة سيدتها فتركته وانصرفت. In other words, the خادمة تركته وانصرفت, went away. فدخل عليها فحياها ووجهه يرفض عرقا, and his face was dripping with sweat. ولسانه لا يكاد يبين. فمدت إليه يدها فتناولها وقبلها قبلة طويلة. عرفت مارغريت سر ما أودعها من عواطف قلبه. Okay, yeah, people in the comments have said that I read too fast and I should slow down in my reading of the Arabic. So if you agree with that sentiment, then post in the comments and let me know. Okay, let's continue. فمدت إليه يدها فتناولها وقبلها قبلة طويلة. عرفت مارغريت سر ما أودعها من عواطف قلبه, وهي العالمة بأسرار القبلات. ثم أذنته بالجلوس فجلس. فأنشأت تسائله, so she began asking him عن نفسه وعن قومه وعن سبب اهتمامه بشأنها. وتبتسم له فيما بين ذلك ابتسامات تلاطفه بها وتمسح عن فؤاده ما ألم به من الروع. فحدثها أنه غريب عن باريس. So he informed her that he's not from town, so he's a foreigner, not a citizen of Paris. وأنه وفد إليها, and that he came to visit Paris منذ 20 يوما, since 20 days, من بلدته Nice, from his home city of Nice. ليقضي فيها 3 أشهر, so that he could spend in Paris 3 months. أذن له أبوه بها, that his father had permitted him to spend. طلبا لتغيير الهواء, in order to seek a change in in atmosphere, a change in environment, وترويح النفس, and a rejuvenation. ثم يعود في نهايتها إلى وطنه, and at the end of these 3 months he could then return back to his hometown. فسألته هل وجد المقام حميدا هنا? So she asked him, did he find residing to be pleasurable or to be praiseworthy? فصمت هنيها. So he remained quiet for a short period of time. ثم نظر إليها نظرة منكسرة, and then he looked to her with a broken glance. وقال لا يا سيدتي. He said, no, my lady. قالت لماذا? She said, why? فحارت بين شفتيه كلمة. So a word was beginning to form between his two lips. لم يستطيع أن ينطق بها, that he was not able to actually articulate it. فعاد إلى صمته. So he returned back to his silence. وإطراقه, and his looking down at the ground. فعادت عليه سؤالها. So she repeated her question again. فقال لها. So he said to her, هل تأذنين لي يا سيدتي? Do you permit me, my lady, أن أقول لك كل ما في نفسي, that I say to you everything that's in my soul? فشعرت بما في نفسه قبل أن يقوله. So she already sensed what was in his soul even before he said it. وقالت له, and she said to him, قل ما تشاء, say whatever you wish, whatever you please. إلا أن تطارحني حبك وغرامك, except that you impose upon me your love and your passion. In other words, don't start saying that you love me, because I'm not ready to bear that. But say anything else. فإنني, that you shower upon me your love and your passion. حبك وغرامك. فإنني امرأة مريضة, because I am a sick woman. لا أستطيع أن أحتمل الحياة وحدها خالصة لا مؤونة فيها. I am not capable of bearing life on its own that's free from all burdens. Okay, that's free and pure and has no burden within it. لا مؤونة فيها. فأحرى. So it's more likely, and it makes more sense, that I will not be able to bear life when it is weighed down with حب and غرام. Okay, ألا أحتملها مثقلة بالحب والغرام. فاصفر وجهه اصفراراً شديداً. So his face became extremely pale. ومد يده إلى دمعة تترقرق في عينيه, and he wiped, and his hand extended to a tear that was beginning to form in his eyes. فمسحها, he wiped it away. ثم قال لها, and then he said to her, ذلك ما يحزنني يا سيدتي, this is exactly what's causing me grief, my lady. ويبكيني, and causing me to cry. وينغص عليك عيشي, and making my life difficult to bear. منذ هبطت باريس حتى اليوم, from the day I arrived in Paris until today. فإنني رأيتك فأحببتك للنظرة الأولى, because I saw you and it was love at first sight. ثم سألت عنك, and then I asked around about you. فعرفت من أمرك كل شيء, so I came to know of everything of your past. وعلمت أنك تعيشين منذ شهور عيشة لا مطمع فيها لطامع ولا أمل لآمل. And I also came to know that you're currently living since several months a life in which there's no coveting for any person of desire, and there's no hope to be had for any person who's hopeful. فانقطع أملي منك, so my own hope regarding you was cut off, and I lost that hope. إلا أن حبي إياك لم ينقطع, except for the fact that my love of you did not go away and did not cease. ثم رأيتك بعد ذلك, and then I saw you after that في ملعب التمثيل, in the theater. ورأيت هذا القناع الأصفر, and I saw this yellow veil الذي نسجته يد المرض على وجهك الجميل, and I saw this yellow veil that the hand of illness had woven over your beautiful face. فاستحال حبي إياك رحمة وشفقة, so my love of you transformed into compassion and mercy. وأصبحت أبكي لمرضك أكثر مما أبكي لحبك, and I started crying due to your illness more than I would cry previously due to your love. وأصبح كل ما أتمنى على الله في حياتي أن أراك بارئة ناعمة, and the greatest and all of what I desire from Allah in my life became for me to see you cured and see you happy and joyful. Mawfuran laki hadhuki, granted to you your allotted share of happiness of life and contentment. من سعادة العيش وهنائه. I just want to see you happy. ثم لا أطمع بعد ذلك في شيء مما يطمع فيه المحبون المغرمون. And then I will not covet after that in any of the things that passionate lovers normally desire. فأنا أقف الساعة بين يديك. So I am standing for an hour in front of you. لا لأطاه now. الساعة means now, it doesn't mean hour. فأنا أقف الساعة. At this moment I am standing in front of you, not in order to convince you of my love and passion, or in order to announce to you that I love you and I'm passionate about you. بل لأسأل أن تأذني لي بالوقوف على بابك. Rather, merely in order to ask you to permit me to stand at your door every time I come. كلما جئته. أسأل خادمتك, in order to ask your maidservant about you. ثم أمضي لسبيلي, and then I'll just go off on my way. من حيث لا ترين وجهي, in a way that you neither see my face nor are you made aware of my presence. ولا تشعرين, nor you sense my presence. بمكاني. فسرت في أعضائها رعدة غير الرعدة التي تعرفها من الحمى. So within her body a shiver occurred which was other than the shiver that she knew from fever. وخيل إليها, and she imagined that she's hearing a tune of love other than the tune that she would hear before today from the mouths of men. Okay, let me read that. فسرت, فسرت, there's no shadda, it's فسرت, because sarra yasurru means to be happy, and sara yasri means to travel or to move through. So basically through her veins and through her body, this shiver moved like electricity, for example. رعدة غير الرعدة التي تعرفها من الحمى, moved through her veins. وخيل إليها أنها تسمع, and she imagined that she's hearing a tune of love غير النغمة التي كانت تسمعها, other than the tune that she used to hear before today from the mouths of men. فنظرت إليه نظرة, so she looked to him. فنظرت إليه نظرة لا تأويل, it should be لا يعلم تأويلها إلا الله تعالى. So she looked to him in a particular way, the interpretation of which no one knows except Allah. ثم قالت له, and then she said to him, إني آذن لك بذلك يا سيدي, I do permit you to do that, O sir. وأشكره لك شكرا جزيلا, and I am extremely indebted to you and I thank you very very much. بل آذنك أن تزورني كلما شئت. In fact, I permit you to visit me whenever you wish. على أن تفد إلي صديقا مساعدا لا محبا مغرما, on the condition that you visit me as a helpful friend and not as a passionate lover. فإني إلى الأصدقاء المخلصين أحوج مني إلى المحبين المغرمين, because I am more in need of sincere friends than I am of passionate lovers. ومدت إليه يدها, and she extended to him her hand, which was a sign that now it's time to leave. فعلم أنها قد أذنت بالانصراف, so he knew that she is permitting him to leave. فقبلها, so he kissed her hand. وانصرف, and he left. مسرورا مغتبطا, happy and joyful. فأتبعته نظرها, so she followed him with her gaze, or she made her gaze follow him. فأتبعته نظرها, two مفعول به. فأتبعت, in other words Marguerite, who the boy, نظرها حتى غاب عنها, until he disappeared. فسقطت على وسادة بجانبها, so she fell on a pillow that was to her side, and she said, good Lord, she said, رحمتك اللهم فإني أخشى أن أحبه, I fear that I'm in love. And that concludes what we'll do for this session, and I'll be back with more And let me know in the comments how you're finding this, the level of the Arabic. Do you enjoy this? The listening experience. Okay, so yeah, go ahead and critique it. Like, I mean, do you want me to do more of it? Do you want me to complete the entire story? So let's see. Depending on the level of engagement that these videos receive, inshallah, I'll continue with this. Okay, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Okay, so now moving on with the third session. She said, لقد أحبته. The author says, لقد أحبته من حيث لا تدري. She fell in love with him without even knowing. من حيث لا تدري. In a way that she wasn't aware. فإن الخوف من الحب, because fear of love is love itself. هو الحب نفسه. بل شعرت في حبه بسعادة لم تشعر بمثلها من قبل. In fact, she felt in loving him a kind of happiness the like of which she had not felt before. لم تشعر بمثلها من قبل. فأصبحت تستقبله, so she began welcoming him كل يوم في منزلها, every day in her home. وتأنس به وبحديثه أنسا كثيرا. And with him and with talking to him, she felt a sense of comfort, a great deal of comfort. She experienced a great deal of comfort. وتفضي إليه بذات نفسها إفضاء الصديق إلى صديقه, and she would confide in him her most secret thoughts, similar to how a friend confides in a friend. أفضى يفضي. أفضى يفضي means to secretly communicate something to a friend, trust them. وتقص عليه قصة ماضيها وحاضرها لا تكذبه شيئا ولا تكتم عنه أمرا. And she related to him the story of her past and the story of her present, not saying anything untrue to him, not speaking any lie to him, and neither concealing from him any matter. ولا تكتم عنه أمرا. So this is تكذب, not تكذب. It's لا تكذبه شيئا, because لا تكذبه شيئا wouldn't make sense. Okay, because كذب يكذب means to accuse someone of lying, and over here it means she would not lie to him, and she would not say anything false to him, nor would she conceal anything from him, any matter. ثم ترامى بها الأمر. And then the matter got out of hand, threw her far to some place where she didn't want to go. ثم ترامى, رمى يرمي means to throw. ثم ترامى بها الأمر. It got out of control, basically. حتى أصبحت تشعر بالوحشة, to the point that she began sensing loneliness. إن تخلف عن ميعاد زيارته بضع دقائق. If he were to be delayed from his appointed time of visitation even for a few minutes. ثم حدث أن انقطع عن زيارتها 3 أيام لأمر عرض له لم يتمكن من إخبارها به. And then it just so happened that he ceased visiting her for 3 consecutive days. أن انقطع عن زيارتها 3 أيام لأمر, due to an issue that had arisen for him, that had come into his life. لم يتمكن من إخبارها به, that he was not able to inform her of. So without notice, he just didn't come for 3 days. فحزنت لانقطاعه حزنا عظيما. So she grieved because of the cessation of his visitation greatly. She grieved greatly. وذهبت بها الوساوس, and all kinds of suspicions and thoughts. She entertained all kinds of suspicions and thoughts, and she didn't know what to think. ثم ذكرت, and then she recalled أن ذلك الحزن وهذا الوسواس ليس من شأنها, that this kind of grief and this kind of suspicion is not her normal way prior to today. فقلقت لذلك قلقا شديدا. So she became extremely anxious as a result of this thought. وخفق قلبها خفقة الرعب والخوف. And her heart pounded in terror and dread. وعلمت أنها قد وقفت, and she knew that she is now standing at the edge of a cliff. على حافة الهوة ولم يبق إلا أن تتردى فيها, and the only thing remaining is for her to fall inside. فسهرت ليلة طويلة, so she remained awake for a long night. عالجت فيها, this should be a jim, عالجت فيها من نوازع النفس وخوالجها ما عالجت. So she experienced all kinds of thoughts, depressing thoughts and emotions, nawazir, emotions, وخوالجها, and all kinds of thoughts were occurring to her, and she experienced them. She experienced what she experienced. ما عالجت حتى أصبح الصباح, until morning arrived. وقد أضمرت في نفسها أمرا, and she had concealed within herself a matter. In other words, this was too much for her, and it became unbearable, and she had to sort of escape from this situation. This attachment was becoming too much for her to bear. Okay, so that was pretty intense. So I don't know, should I reread it again, or are we good to continue? Okay, maybe I'll just read the Arabic. Okay, لقد أحبته من حيث لا تدري, فإن الخوف من الحب هو الحب نفسه, بل شعرت في حبه بسعادة لم تشعر بمثلها من قبل, فأصبحت تستقبله كل يوم في منزلها, وتأنس به وبحديثه أنسا كثيرا. So she was comforted by him and by his speech, by his conversation, very, very much. وتفضي إليه بذات نفسها إفضاء الصديق إلى صديقه, and she would confide in him her most secret thoughts, similar to how a friend confides in his friend. وتقص عليه قصة ماضيها وحاضرها لا تكذبه شيئا ولا تكتم عنه أمرا. So they're trusting one another. ثم ترامى بها الأمر, and then the matter got out of hand to the point that أصبحت تشعر بالوحشة إن تخلف عن ميعاد زيارته بدقائق. ثم حدث أن انقطع عن زيارتها, and then it just so happened, حدث, the following event occurred, that he stopped visiting her for 3 days. ثلاثة أيام لأمر عرض له, due to a matter that had happened to him, due to something that occurred for him. لم يتمكن من إخبارها به فحزنت لانقطاعه حزنا عظيما وذهبت بها الوساوس والظنون كل مذهب. And then the wasawis and the dhunun took her in every possible direction. Or she entertained all these different thoughts. ثم ذكرت أن ذلك الحزن وهذا الوسواس ليس من شأنها قبل اليوم. And now she's reflecting that this kind of grief and this kind of suspicion has never been her normal way prior to today. فقلقت لذلك قلقا شديدا, and this made her extremely anxious. وخفق قلبها خفقة الرعب والخوف, وعلمت أنها قد وقفت على حافة الهوة ولم يبق إلا أن تتردى فيها فسهرت ليلة طويلة. So she remained awake for a long night. عالجت فيها, in which, in other words, during that night, in which she experienced the emotions of the nafs, the nawazi'un nafs, and all these terrible thoughts that she experienced. ما عالجت حتى أصبح الصباح وقد أضمرت في نفسها أمرا. جاء أرمان. Okay, so Armand, the gentleman's name, he came in the morning of the 4th day. في صباح اليوم الرابع فوجدها طريحة فراشها. So he found her lying flat on her bed. وفي عينيها حمرة البكاء والسهر. And in her 2 eyes was redness from crying and as a result of staying awake. فارتاع لمنظرها. So he was terrified by her appearance. وقال لها, and he said to her, لعلك سهرت بالأمس كثيرا يا سيدتي أو بكيت فإني أرى في عينيك أثر واحد منهما. He said, perhaps you've stayed awake all last night. You've been awake last night for lengthy periods of time, my lady, or you've been crying, because I see within your eyes the effects of one of these two. She said, هما معا يا أرمان, both of them, O Armand. قال وهل حدث شيء جديد? He asked, has something new occurred? قالت, she said, اجلس بجانبي قليلا, sit with me for a short period of time, أيها الصديق, oh dear friend, أحدثك حديثا قصيرا. I will say something brief to you. I will speak to you briefly. وربما كان آخر حديث بيني وبينك, and perhaps this may be the last conversation we have between us. ثم لا أراك بعد ذلك ولا تراني, and then after that neither will I see you nor will you see me. فذعر ذعرا شديدا. So he became incredibly alarmed. وداخله من الرعب والهول ما ملك عليه عقله ولسانه. And terror and dread penetrated into him, such terror and dread penetrated into him that completely took over his intellect and his ability to speak. فلم يستطيع أن يقول شيئا. So he was not able to say anything. وسقط بجانبها واهيا متضعضعا. So and he fell beside her, weak and withered and frail. وظل ينظر إلى وجهها نظر المتهم إلى وجه قاضيه. This should be قاضيه with one dot there and two dots underneath the ya. And he began looking towards her face, similar to how the accused looks towards the face of his judge. ساعة نطقه بالحكم, at the moment when the judge is pronouncing the sentence. فأقبلت عليه تحدثه وتقول. So she turned to him, saying to him and speaking, عرفتك يا أرمان, I've known you, O Armand, and within you I've known a gentleman. فعرفت فيك الرجل الكريم الذي أحبني لنفسي, who loved me for my sake more than he loved me for his own sake. أكثر مما أحبني لنفسه. والصديق الوفي, and within you I recognized the loyal friend الذي امتزجت في قلبه عاطفة الحب بعاطفة الرحمة, in whose heart were mixed the emotions of love. The emotion of love became mixed with the emotion of compassion and mercy. بعاطفة الرحمة والحنان. فأوى إلى مريضة. So he turned to a sick lady. حينما جفاني الناس لمرضي. At a time when the rest of the people had forsaken me due to my illness. وعاش معي, and he lived with me بلا أمل, with no hope. حينما انقطع الناس عني, at a time when the people ceased visiting me or cut away from me, boycotted me. لانقطاع أملهم مني, due to their hope being lost from me. فأضمرت لك في قلبي من الحب والاحترام ما لم أضمره لأحد سواك. So I conceal for you within my heart the kind of love and respect that I have never concealed for anyone other than you. ما لم أضمره لأحد سواك. وسعدت بك سعادة, and I am happy by your company in a way the like of which I have not experienced in any day from the days of my life. وسعدت بك سعادة لم أشعر بمثلها في يوم من أيام حياتي. ولكن الله الذي كتب لي الشقاء في لوح مقاديره من ضجعة المهد إلى رقد اللحد لم يشاء أن يمتعني طويلا بهذه السعادة. However, God Almighty, who wrote for me wretchedness in the tablet of His divine decree, within the tablet of His divine decree, from the lying in the cradle, from the time I was sleeping in the cradle to my final sleep in the grave, lam yasha, this God Almighty does not want for me to experience enjoyment for any long period of time. It does not want to benefit me طويلا بهذه السعادة. وأبى إلا أن يسلبنيها وشيكا, and he refuses except to take it away from me. وشيكا, like suddenly. فقد أصبحت أشعر منذ أيام, so I have begun sensing since the last few days أن تلك العاطفة الشريفة المقدسة, that this holy, sacred, noble emotion التي كنت أستمد منها سعادتي وهنائي, from which I was extracting my happiness and my serenity, قد أخذت تستحيل, has now begun changing in the depths of my heart to another emotion other than it, which I do not want for myself. قد أخذت تستحيل في أعماق قلبي, within the depths of my heart, إلى عاطفة أخرى غيرها لا أريدها لنفسي. ولا أرى إلا أنها ستكون سبب شقائي وبلائي, and all I see is that this new emotion will soon become the cause of my misery and my calamity. فخادعت نفسي عنها حينا, so I deceive myself regarding it at certain times. أكذبها مرة, I reject and deny it at certain times. وأصدقها أخرى, and I begin believing it at other times. حتى كان ما كان من انقطاعك عني تلك الأيام الثلاثة, until the incident which occurred, i.e. your cessation of visitation from me for those 3 days. تلك الأيام الثلاثة فشعرت لغيابك بحزن, so due to your absence I sensed grief that disturbed me and made me anxious. أقلقني وأمضني وملك على جميع عواطفي, and took control of all of my emotions and my sentiments. Okay, عواطفي ومشاعري. ولو شئت أن أقول لقلت إنه أبكاني كثيرا, and if I may say, I'd say that it made me cry a lot. إنه أبكاني كثيرا وأسهرني طويلا, and kept me awake for long periods of time. فعلمت, so I know, وأسفاه, and how regretful, أنني قد أصبحت عاشقة, that I have fallen in love, وأن هذا الذي يختلج في قلبي ويقيمني ويقعدني, and this thing that's developing within my heart and making me stand and making me sit, in other words agitating me. ويقيمني ويقعدني إنما هو الحب والغرام, it's love and passion, that's what it is. فغديت ليلة الأمس كلها, so I spent the entire last night أفكر في طريق الخلاص من هذه النكبة العظمى, thinking and reflecting about the solution to free myself from this great calamity. من هذه النكبة العظمى, from this great catastrophe. التي نزلت بي, which has fallen upon me. فلم أجد أحدا يخلصني منها سواك, so I do not find anyone able to free me from it other than you. فأنا أسألك يا أرمان باسم الصداقة والود, so I ask you, O Armand, in the name of friendship and in the name of love, الذي تعاقدنا عليه بالأمس, that we entered into a covenant about yesterday. In other words, that love that we agreed to, we trusted one another with it. بل باسم الدموع, in fact I ask you in the name of those tears, التي طالما كنت تسكبها رحمة بي وإشفاقا علي, that you all the time would shed out of mercy and compassion for me. أن تنقطع, I asked you that you stop visiting me. أن تنقطع عن زيارتي منذ اليوم, starting from today. وأن تسافر إلى أهلك الليلة, and that you travel to your family this very night, إن استطعت, if you're able to. ثم لا تعود إلي بعد ذلك, and then do not come back to me after that. فأحمل نفسي على الصبر, so I will train myself to be patient. I will force myself to be patient from you, حتى يمن الله علي براحة اليأس منك, until God Almighty bestows upon me the favor and by granting me relief. براحة اليأس, by the relief of despair from you. In other words, I'll stop thinking about you, and this will be for me a relief. ثم نظرت إليه لترى ما يقول, and then she looked to him to see what response he gives. فإذا هو جامد مصفر, so he was still, frozen, yellow. كأن وجهه وجه تمثال, as if his face was the face of a statue. منحوت, وجه تمثال منحوت, the face of a carved statue. وإذا عيناه شاخصتان إليه, and his two eyes were staring with an empty stare towards her. شخوص العين القائمة, in the way that a defective eye that seems normal but just stares in no particular direction. التي تنظر إلى الشيء, that looks towards something ولا تراه, and does not see it. وبعد لائي ما استطاع يحرك شفتيه, and after an indefinite amount of time. لائي ما, and this ma is extraneous. So after some period of time passed, استطاع, he mustered up the courage to move his lips. استطاع, he was capable أن يحرك شفتيه ويقول لها, and to say to her بصوت خافت, with a weak voice, كصوت الضمير, similar to the voice of the conscience. وما يخيفك من الحب يا مارغريت, and what is it exactly that frightens you regarding love, O Marguerite? Why are you so afraid? قالت يخيفني منه العقاب الأليم. What frightens me concerning love is the painful punishment that I expect that God Almighty will punish me with, because of my earlier sins and evil acts that I committed in the earlier portion of my life. Okay, so she's saying يخيفني منه العقاب الأليم الذي أتوقع أن يعاقبني به الله على ما اقترفت من الذنوب والآثام في فاتحة حياتي. فقد كتب الله لنا معشر النساء الساقطات في لوح مقاديره, because God Almighty has decreed for us the assembly of fallen women in His preserved tablet, His divine decree. ألا نزال نعبث بقلوب الرجال, that we will persistently toy and play with the hearts of men, وعقولهم, and with their minds, ونبتليهم, and we will afflict them with all kinds of punishment, بصنوف العذاب وأنواع الآلام, and various types of pain, حتى يغضب الله لهم, until God Almighty eventually becomes angry for their sake and becomes jealous. Okay, now she's speaking inappropriately, obviously. وَيَغَارَ عَلَيْهِمْ فَيَبْتَلِينَ, so He then afflicts us with a love, نَحْمِلُ فِيهِ الْعَذَابِ, in which we are now bearing punishment. فِيهِ الْعَذَابَ جَمِيعَ مَا حَمَّلْنَاهُ مِنْ قَبْلُ, and I think there should be a min here. It should be like this: حَتَّى يَغْضَبَ اللَّهُ لَهُمْ, until Allah becomes angry for their sake and becomes jealous for them. فَيَبْتَلِينَ بِحُبٍّ نُحَمِّلُ فِيهِ مِنَ الْعَذَابِ جَمِيعَ مَا حَمَّلْنَاهُ مِنْ قَبْلُ, that He then thrusts upon us and afflicts us. يَبْتَلِينَ, afflicts us with a love in which we are forced to bear all of the punishment that we imposed upon others before. وَنَشْقَى فِيهِ, and within this punishment we become miserable, and that misery never ends except with the end of our life. That remains until our last breath, basically. وَنَشْقَى فِيهِ شَقَاءً لَا يَنْتَهِي إِلَّا بِانْتِهَاءِ حَيَاتِنَا, that does not end except with the ending of our life. فَنَمُوتُ بَيْنَ يَدَيْ أَنفُسِنَا, and we die in front of our own selves. مُهْمَلَات, in other words, all alone, neglected. مُغَفَّلَات, no one to take care of us. لا ينعانا ناعٍ, no one to bereave us. ولا يبكي علينا باكٍ, and no person to cry over us. فهذا الذي أخافه, so this is what I fear and this is what I dread. أخافه وأخشاه وأحب أن يسبق إلي أجلي قبل أن أراه, and I would prefer that my appointed time of death precede me before I'm able to see this. In other words, I would rather die before I see this. أنا لا أتهمك بالخيانة والغدر, I do not accuse you of treachery or dishonesty, يا أرمان, فأنت أجل من ذلك عندي, because you are more noble than that in my eyes, according to me. ولكني أعلم أنك باق في هذا البلد إلى أجل. However, I know that you're only here within this city for a period of time. فإذا انقضى الأجل, so when this period of time ends, سافرت إلى أهلك سفرا, you will be forced to travel back to your family. لا تملك بعده العودة إلي, after which you will not be able to return back to me. فإن أبيت إلا البقاء, if you insist on returning, in other words, if you refuse to do nothing except return, or if you refuse to do nothing except remain بجانبي, at my side, حال أهلك. Okay, so we change the double negative and turn it into positive. So if you insist on remaining at my side, حال أهلك بينك وبين ذلك, your family will pose opposition and become a barrier between you and between that intention. لأنهم قوم شرفاء, because they are a noble people. يظنون بك, they are jealous for you. In other words, they're very protective of you. وبشرفك, and protective of your honor. أن تلوثهما امرأة مومس, that some prostitute woman make it filthy, okay, or violate it. تلوثهما امرأة مومس بعادها, by her shame and by her wickedness. وشنارها. فلا تجد لك بدا من الخضوع لهم, so you will have no means of escape from submitting to them and from accepting their judgment. من الخضوع لهم والنزول على حكمهم. وهنالك, and at that point, أقف موقف الحيرة, I will be standing there perplexed and startled and confused. حيرة واللوعة. أطلب السبيل إليك, I will seek a path to you and I will not find it. فلا أجدك. والسلو عنك فلا أستطيعه, and I will want to receive closure from you and I will not be capable of that. وربما حاولت بعد ذلك العودة إلي. Okay, so I'm thinking that this is the author is formatting these verbs second person. The book is without vowels, right? وَرُبَّمَا حَاوَلْتَ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ الْعَوْدَةَ إِلَيَّ, and perhaps you may wish and intend after that to return to me. After that to return to me. So الْعَوْدَةَ إِلَيَّ is the مفعول به. No. Oh, okay, I was mistaken. Inna lillah, I was mistaken. It's like this. وَرُبَّمَا حَاوَلْتُ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ الْعَوْدَةَ إِلَى كَنَفِ ذَلِكَ الشَّيْخِ الْكَرِيمِ. And this word is kanaf. And kanaf, it means within the embrace. Okay, and it's likely the case, وَرُبَّمَا, and perhaps I will want after that to return back to the protection of that noble old man who extended to me great favor. الذي أحسن إلي إحسانا كبيرا فطردني من بين يديه عقابا. So he banished me and he boycotted me. He kicked me away from in front of him. No, فطردني. Okay, so basically there's حاولت. Okay, so it's like future tense. وَرُبَّمَا حَاوَلْتُ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ. The verbs are madi, but they're transformed into the future tense because of the adverbial nature of it. And perhaps I will want after that to return back to the protection of that noble sheikh who was so good to me before. فَطَرَدَنِي, and then he will boycott me and he will remove me from in front of him. عِقَابًا, as a punishment. على خيانة عهدي, on my having broken his covenant. وكفر نعمته, and on my having been ungrateful of his blessing. فلا أجد لي, so I will not find for myself any escape from returning back to my previous life. من الرجوع إلى حياتي الأولى, حياة الشرور والآثام, the life of sin and evil. والهموم والآلام, and anxieties and pains. التي أبغضها بغض الأرض للدم, the one that I despise and hate so fiercely, like the earth hates blood. وهنالك العذاب الدائم, and that will be perpetual punishment, and that will be a long misery. إني أعلم, that should be إني أعلم يا أرمان أنك تحبني حبا جما. I know for a fact, O Armand, that you love me very, very much. وأنك ستكابد في ابتعادك عني عذابا كثيرا, and that you will suffer in being distant from me a great amount of pain and punishment. ولكني أعلم, however, I also know أن قلبا شريفا يحتمل العذاب في سبيل الرحمة, that a noble heart bears pain and punishment for the sake of mercy. فاحتمل هذا العذاب, so bear this punishment for my sake. من أجلي فإنك أقدر مني, because you are more capable than I am of bearing pain and punishment. على احتمال الآلام والأوجاع. So these are synonyms. آلام means pain and الأوجاع means suffering. وسأدعو الله تعالى ليلي ونهاري, and I will pray to God Almighty night and day, أن يمنحني الصبر عنك, that He grant me patience from you, ويرزقني راحة النفس وسكونها, and that He provide to me a sense of comfort and a sukoon من بعدك, after being separated from you, وأن يمنحك من ذلك مثل ما يمنحني, and that He grant to you as well similar to what He grants to me. فلعله يرحمنا جميعا, so perhaps He'll have mercy on both of us. فلم يكن له جواب على كلمتها هذه سوى أن نهض من مكانه متضعضعا متهالكا. So he didn't have any response on her words, on these words of hers, other than the fact that he stood from his place, like falling and weak, falling and about to collapse. ومشى إلى باب القاعة, and he walked to the door of the porch, the threshold. يسوق نفسه, driving himself, like really trying and driving himself with much great effort. يسوق نفسه سوقا حتى بلغه, until he reached the edge of the door. فوقف على عتبته, so he stood on its threshold. والتفت إلى Marguerite, and he turned to Marguerite. وألقى عليها تلك النظرة, and he cast on her that gaze or that sight, التي يلقيها المحتضر على أهله في آخر لحظات حياته, that the person on their deathbed looks to their family with that same gaze in the final moments of their lives. وقال لها, and he said to her, farewell, O Marguerite. الوداع يا Marguerite. ومضى, and he walked away. فما غاب شخصه عن عينيها, so his person did not disappear from her eyesight. حتى نهضت, that she couldn't control herself, and she got up من فراشها, from her bed, هائمة مختبلة, like in a daze and confused, and like not being able to, senselessly. واندفعت إلى الباب, and she forced herself to the door, تريد اللحاق به, wanting to catch up to him. ثم تراجعت, and then she returned back. ثم حاولت ذلك مرة أخرى, and then she intended that once more. فأدركها رشدها, so her intelligence reached her. In other words, she came to her senses. وأناتها, and her calmness returned back to her. فعادت إلى فراشها, so she returned back to her bed. تبكي وتنتحب, crying and wailing. وتعول إعوالا شديدا, and screaming like uncontrollably. وتدور في أنحاء الغرفة, and she was roaming within the corners of the room. دوران الثاكلة المفجوعة, in the manner of a mother who's lost one of her children. وهي تصيح, while screaming and crying, أرجعوه إلي, bring him back to me. لا أستطيع فراقه, I am not able to remain without him. سأموت من بعده, I will die after him. وإنها لكذلك, and she was doing all of these things. إذا سمعت صرخة عظمى, that lo and behold she heard a loud scream coming from the direction of the garden. آتية من ناحية الحديقة, فخرجت تعدو, so she left running to where she heard the sound. إلى حيث سمعت الصوت حتى بلغت باب المنزل, until she reached the door of the home. فرأت أرمان ساقطا تحت عتبته مشغيا عليه, so she saw Armand fallen at the threshold of the door, مغشيا عليه, collapsed unconscious. فرفعت طرفها إلى السماء, so she raised her eye to the sky, and she said, whatever God wills, so be it. Whatever God wills, so be it. ليكن ما أراد الله. ثم ألقت نفسها عليه, and then she threw herself on him. ولثمته على ثغره, should be على ثغره, لثمة هي أول لثمة ذاقت فيها لذة العيش في حياتها, and she kissed him on his lips, such a kiss that was the first kiss in which she tasted the pleasure of life since she was born. في حياتها. فشعر بها أرمان. So Armand also felt the same. فاستفاق. So he came to his senses. وضمها إلى صدره. And he pressed her to his chest. ضمة. With such pressure. لو مات على أثرها. That if he were to die after, as a result of it, ما بكى على شيء من نعيم الدنيا وهنائها. He would not have any need to cry over anything from the blessings of the dunya and for the comfort of the dunya. Okay. So انقضى الشتاء فانقضى بانقضائه شقاء مرغريت وعناؤها. Winter came to an end, and with the coming to the end of winter, so did the misery of Marguerite and the pain that she was enduring. فقد أبلت من مرضها, because she had now received relief from her illness. وأصبحت سعيدة بحبها, and she is now happy with her love. فلم يبق بين يديها, so there's nothing remaining in front of her إلا أن تبلغ من تلك السعادة نهايتها, except for her to reach the very final stages of this happiness. فاقترحت على أرمان أن يترك باريس وضوضاءها. So she suggested to Armand that both of them leave behind Paris and its commotion, وضوضاءها ومزدحم الحياة, and the busy life in Paris, and they run off to some resort, some summer resort, إلى مصيف يختارانه, that the two of them will choose for themselves. في بعض الأماكن الخالية, in some deserted area. فقبل مقترحها, so he accepted her suggestion. وسافرا معا, and the two of them traveled. يفتشان عن المكان الذي يريدان, looking for that exact spot that they're wanting and intending. حتى بلغا قرية بوجفال, until they reach a small town called Bujifal. وهي ضاحية من ضواحي باريس, and it was one of the suburbs, from the suburbs of Paris. على بعد ساعتين منها, about 2 hours from the city. فوجدا في بعض أرباضها, so they found in one of its mountainous regions. Okay, so some of this vocabulary I'm just guessing, like I don't know what it means. So they found in some of its mountainous or regions, they found a home, منزلا صغيرا منفردا, a single isolated home, small, واقعا على رأس هضبة, that was situated on top of a hill, a high hill. في سفح جبل, at the bottom of a mountain, at the bottom of a green mountain. في سفح جبل مخضر تجري من تحته بحيرة صافية بديعة, at the foot of which, or beneath which, a small, clean, unique stream was flowing. كأنما بناه بانيه لهما, as if the person who constructed it built it for them. فاقترياه, so they rented it. ونقلت مارغريت إليه من منزلها في باريس بعدما يحتاجان إليه من أثاث ومتاع. And Marguerite transferred to it from her home in Paris some of the furniture and other belongings that they would need. ثم عاشا فيه بعد ذلك عيشا ناعما هنيئا. And then they lived there after that a peaceful, happy life. لا تضطرب في سمائه غيمة, in the sky of which no cloud, there was no disruption of any cloud. It was a clear sky. ولا تمر بصفحته غبرة, and the surface of which was not clouded by, was not blemished by any dust. غبرة. And no dust would pass over. مر يمر means to pass over. And no dust would pass over its surface. ولا يكدر عليهما مكدر من خواطر الشقاء ووساوسه, and of the thoughts of misery and its the synonyms خواطر and wasawis, and these involuntary thoughts of misery, nothing blemishing from the thoughts of misery would ruin it, would cause any blemish to them. فكان يقضيان نهارهما, So they would spend their day صاعدان إلى قمة الجبل, either climbing up to the top of the mountain, أو منحدرين إلى سفحه, or descending down to the foot of the mountain, أو راكبين زورقا صغيرا, or riding on some small boat, يسبح بهما, that would sail with them, على صفحة البحيرة, on the surface of the small stream, جيئة وذهوبا, going and coming and going, أو جالسين, or they would spend their time sitting beneath a leafy tree, شجرة فرعاء تظللهما من لفحات الهجير, that would shade them from the intense heat of the sun, afternoon sun, وتضمهما إليه, and that would cover them in its embrace, similar to how it covers its fruits. كما تضم ثمارها, أو مضطجعين على بساط, or lying down on some carpet of grass that spread out on the surface, on the clear surface. في تلك البطحاء الفسيحة. يتناجيان, conversing with one another, chit-chatting and having some intimate conversations. ويلهوان, and just having fun. بمنظر, and enjoying بمنظر الجمال المائل, the beautiful sight that المائل في الشاطئ. Okay, بمنظر جمال المائل في الشاطئ, on the beach. Okay, في الشاطئ, that, yeah, شاطئ means beach. والأمواج, and the waves. والأخاديد, and the trenches. والوديان, and the valleys. والغابات, and the forests. والحرجات, and okay, I'm not sure a lot of what these words mean. والكهوف والأغوار, and the caves, and the tunnels. والغيوم والسحب, and the clouds, and just various words for clouds. والغيوم والسحب والأضواء, and the lights. في تشكلها وتلونها, in their formations and in their different colors. والظلال في نحولها وانتقالها, in the shadows, in their thinness and in their movement. وفي رؤوس الجبال, and they're enjoying the tops of the mountains that are touching the skin of the sky, as if they too are clouds. The top of the mountains are like part of the clouds. كأنها بعض سحبها وفي قطع الصخور, and the boulders that are scattered on the sides of the pools of water. على جوانب الغدران كأنها بعض أمواجها, as if they're a part of their waves. وفي تلك المعركة, and in watching that battle, that particular battle, التي تدور, that occurs every day twice between the two armies of lights and darkness, the two armies of the rays of light on the one hand and the darknesses on the other hand. فينتصر في صدر النهار أولهما, that in the beginning of the day the first of them is victorious, and then towards the end of the day victory is granted to the second of them. In other words, night and day. Okay, so he's being very eloquent here. So I think وفي تلك المعركة التي تدور في كل يوم مرتين بين جيشي الأنوار والظلمات فينتصر في صدر النهار أولهما ثم يدال في آخره لثانيهما حتى إذا جاء الليل عادا إلى منزلهما, until when night would come, the two of them would return to their home. فنعمتا فيه, or نعما فيه, then the two would enjoy themselves بألوان النعم, with all the various forms of blessing. وضروبه, and its kinds. ورشفا من كل ثغر من ثغور السعادة رشفة, and they would sip from every mouth, from the mouths of, lips. Thaghr means lips. From all of the lips of happiness, they would be able to suck and drink rashfa, a sip. Tasri halawatuha, the sweetness of which would penetrate into the depths of their hearts. Hatta penetrate into their hearts until it reaches the very core. Hatta tusiba samimahu. Marra bihima ala dhalika aamun kamil. So a good year, an entire year passed over them in this state. هو كل ما استطاع, and that was the extent of what they were able to snatch from the hand of the universe while it was heedless, in its heedlessness. So they use the term dahr in the times of Jahiliyyah. Instead of attributing things to God, they would say that the dahr did it, which today, the ignorant people today say the universe did it. Okay, so this was the extent of what they were able to steal from the hand of the universe while it was looking the other way. ثم انتبه لهما بعد ذلك, and then it became alert to them after that period of ghafla. It woke up. Basically, the dahr woke up. وَوَيْلٌ لِلسُّعَدَاءِ مِنْ انتباهه بعد إغفائه, and woe to the happy people from the waking up of the dahr after it's having slept for a while. So in other words, you don't want to be anywhere in that vicinity when the dahr wakes up. فَقَدْ نَضَبَ أو أوشك أن ينضب ما كان في يد أرمان من المال. So the wealth that Armand had in his hand had either depleted or it was very close to depleting. وكان في يده الكثير منه, and he started off with a great deal of wealth. فكتب إلى أبيه, so he wrote a letter to his father, يطلب إليه أن يبعث إليه ما يستعين على البقاء في باريس مدة أخرى. So he wrote a letter to his father requesting to him that the father sent to him more money, that with which he would be able to يستعين, seek support himself for a further duration in Paris, مدة أخرى. زاعما أنه لا يزال مريضا, claiming, زاعما here means claiming that he's still sick and he's still in pain, لا يستطيع السفر, incapable of traveling, وكذلك كان يفعل من حين إلى حين, and this is what he used to do from time to time. In other words, write letters. فلم يأته الرد, and no response came. فأقلقه ذلك قلقا شديدا, so this disturbed him and made him extremely anxious. وظل يختلف إلى المدينة, and he would frequently go to the city every day في كل يوم, يسأل في فندق تورين, asking at the hotel Turin الذي كان ينزل به, where he was supposed to be boarding at that hotel, قبل اتصاله, that he was boarding there before his relationship began with Marguerite, عن الكتاب الذي, asking at that hotel about a response letter that he's waiting for, فلا يجده, and he would not find a response. فيعود حزينا, so he would return back grief-stricken, منقبضا, depressed, حتى إذا وصل إلى بوجفال, until he returned back to Bujifal, which is the village where they're staying. ورأى مرغريت بين يديه حتى إذا وصل إلى بوجفال ورأى مرغريت بين يديه تطلق وتبسم. That's how it should be. تطلق وتبسم, until when he would reach Bujifal and see Marguerite in front of him, he would smile and pretend like nothing bad is happening. تطلق وتبسم. They both mean the same thing. He would greet her with a happy face and smile. كأنه لا يضمر في نفسه هما قاتلا, as if he is not concealing within his soul a fatal kind of worry, ولكن عين مرغريت أقدر من أن يعجزها النفاذ إلى أعماق قلبه فاقتنهت سره فكاشفته به. However, Marguerite's eye was more capable than to fall short of penetrating into the depths of his heart. من أن يعجزها. So I think that's fine. The translation is good. يعجزها النفاذ إلى أعماق قلبه, that penetrating into the depths of his heart would be out of her control. In other words, she was able to do that. It wasn't as if she couldn't do that. فاقتهنت, so she was able to arrive at the reality of his secret. So kun means reality. اقتنهت means to reach a reality, the reality of his secret. فكاشفته, so she confronted him and asked him to clarify. فكشفته به وقالت, and she said, لا oh no, she revealed it to him. She revealed the secret to him. وقالت, and she said, لا يحزنك شأن المال يا أرمان. Let not the matter of wealth cause you any stress, O Armand. فإن عندي منه ما يكفينا, because I have enough wealth to يكفينا العيش معا سنين طوالا, that it will be enough for us to live together for long years. ولم تكن صادقة فيما تقول, and she was not entirely truthful in what she was saying. لأن الدوق قاطعها, because the Duke had boycotted her. ومنع عنها رفده, and had withheld from her the support he was giving to her. مذ عرف قصتها مع أرمان, from the time he became aware of her affair with Armand. وعلم أنها خانته, and the time when he came to know that she betrayed him and she betrayed his covenant. بل كانت مدينة, in fact she was indebted بمال كثير, to a large extent, لبعض تجار الجواهر والثياب, to some jewelers and some cloth merchants. بل أصبح دائنوها يتقاضونها ديونهم. In fact, her creditors were now beginning to demand back their loans. Okay, بعدما علموا, when they also came to know that the Duke has boycotted her. أن الدوق قاطعها ونفض يده منها, and has washed his hands from her. ولكنها خاطرت, however she gambled and she risked with that word she spoke, a kind of risk that she wasn't really thinking about its consequences. لم تفكر في عاقبتها فأكبر أرمان ذلك. So this caused Armand a great deal of stress. وعظمه, and it was too much for him. وأنف منه أنفة شديدة, and he detested it very much. وأنف منه أنفة شديدة, and like that someone else would be financially responsible for him, and he felt it was his responsibility to support his woman, so he didn't want that. فأكبر أرمان ذلك وعظمه وأنف منه أنفة شديدة, he detested it. وأبى أن يعيش معها بمال غير ماله, and refused that to live with her with wealth other than his own wealth. وعزم أن يسافر إلى نيس, and he became determined, or he made a firm intention to travel back to Nice, ليأتي منها بالمال, in order that he can bring back from there wealth that he was intending. بالمال الذي يريده. فأزعجها عزمه هذا إزعاجا شديدا. So this resolve of his disturbed her greatly. وخافت عاقبته, and she became fearful of its consequence. In other words, the minute he goes, he's not coming back. فجثت بين يديه, so she kneeled in front of him, تستعطفه, seeking compassion from him, وتسترحمه, and seeking mercy, وتبذل في ضراعتها ورجائها في سبيل بقائه أكثر مما بذلت قبل اليوم في سبيل رحيله. And exerting or spending in her beseeching, or in her hope, or her begging him. Dara'a means begging. So she exerted so much effort in begging him in the path of his remaining, more than the amount of beseeching she did earlier in wanting him to go away. If you remember a few pages ago, she was wanting him to leave, and now she wants him to stay more than that. حتى أذعن, until he yielded. واستقاد, and he agreed. ورضي بالتي لم يكن يرضى بمثلها, and he became content with that arrangement, that the like of which he would not otherwise have been content with. لولا لهفة الحب, had it not been for the flame of love, وضراعة الدموع, and the humbleness of the tears. وقد أضمر في نفسه أن يتنازل لها, but he was secretly telling himself أن يتنازل لها, that he will acquiesce. I think that's the word in English. He will acquiesce from his share of inheritance that he is to receive from his mother mukafa'atan laha, as a compensation to her and as loyalty for her right. Okay, what does that mean? What is he referring to? Okay, I'm not quite sure. But I guess it means that he's now willing to disobey his parents. And if he disobeys his parents, then he's going to lose the share of inheritance that he would have otherwise received. But he's saying, fine, she means more to me than that inheritance. Okay, let me know in the comments, what do you think? Was that a correct interpretation? فَلَمْ يَكُنْ لِمَرْغَرِيتَ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ بُدٌّ. So Marguerite had no excuse after that مِنْ أَن تَمُدَّ يَدَهَا, from now reaching her hand towards her jewelry and towards her treasures. فَأَنْشَأَتْ تَبِيعُ الْقِطْعَةَ بَعْدَ الْقِطْعَةِ, and then she began selling off item after item. لِتَسُدَّ بَعْدَ دَيْنِهَا, in order to pay off a portion of her debt. وَتَقُومَ بِنَفَقَةِ بَيْتِهَا, and to for the upkeep of her, or to cover her expenses of her home. Cover the expenses of her home. مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَعْلَمُ أَرْمَانَ. She did it in a way that Armand would not become aware of it. وَاسْتَمَرَّ عَلَى ذَلِكَ, and the two of them remained in that situation بِضْعَةَ أَشْهُرٍ, for several more months. حَتَّى دَخَلَ عَلَيْهِمَا فِي يَوْمٍ مِنَ الْأَيَّامِ, until in one particular day from the days, within the moments of their intimacy and their happiness, what happened was دَخَلَ عَلَيْهِمَا خَادِم, the servant from the Hotel Turin entered and interrupted them. الَّذِي كَانَ يَنْزِلُ بِهِ, and this is the same hotel that Armand was visiting, or was supposedly living in Paris. وَقَالَ لَهُ, and the Khadim told him and said, إِنَّ وَالِدَهُ, that his father has just this very moment reached the hotel, and he is waiting for them there, and he is waiting for him there. وَإِنَّهُ يَنْتَظِرُهُ هُنَاكَ, and we will stop it here, and we'll continue in the next video. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين.